Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. I pretend I'm banging on something. Okay. If you could silence your cell phones, and please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I feel like this microphone's really... Yeah, I said that, yeah. All right, we have a lot of new guests at City Council tonight, which is so exciting. Welcome new guests. Welcome people that come all the time too, but welcome also to our new guests. We have one proclamation on our agenda tonight, and our Councilmember Brian Haynes will be reading it, and it is in honor of Latinx Heritage Month. And I would invite everyone who is here for this item to please step up here to the podium area, and Councilman Haynes will meet you down there. So Amy, if you want to help encourage some folks, come on up, get out of your seats, and come on up.
And below.
While you all are making your way up here, I have a sneaking suspicion that possibly our superintendent of Buncombe County Schools, Tony Baldwin, who's in the back, is here on this item as well. Welcome.
Let me start by saying I'm honored to have been asked to read this proclamation tonight. Whereas 8 Latin American countries, Honduras, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Chile, Mexico, and Belize celebrate their independence beginning September 15th, October 15th, and beginning September 15th through October 15th. Whereas a beautiful collaboration exists to celebrate our Latinx community by bringing the youth through Manos and the mothers of de Mujer e Mujer en Sí and the community of beloved Asheville together to hold a number of celebratory events to share Latinx culture, art, history, traditions, and to celebrate our Latinx community in Asheville. These grassroots groups make our community stronger and connect us to larger institutions as Manos exhibits through its partnerships between Buncombe County Schools and Warren Wilson College. And whereas our Latinx community is proud of our culture and our ancestors, and whereas the ancient Mayans taught us to see all people and to say, "You are my other self," and therefore we seek to embody this truth through sharing, community, and deep compassion that this understanding brings to us. And whereas migration is beautiful, and we know this is the reason why country is what it is today, because of the migration of people from different parts of the world and many contributions of all these peoples. And whereas we are here for the future and safety of our children, to work hard, respect, and be respected for our efforts and honesty. And whereas we want what every parent wants for their children, happiness, opportunities, and that we are no different as people, we laugh and cry for the same reasons. Whereas our youth should be able to focus on their dreams and how they might share their gifts instead of growing up terrorized and in fear of losing their family members. And whereas we, the Asheville community, should always work to protect everyone who is part of the Latinx community from being targeted by hate, discrimination, and systems of oppression. And whereas the city of Asheville is working to embody the values of welcome and equity and the celebration of all who call Asheville home. And now, therefore, Esther Mannheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, does hereby proclaim September and October as Latinx Heritage Months in the City of Asheville and encourage residents to participate in Latinx heritage activities.
Because we know that in this country and in Asheville is more than one language, we're going to read the proclamation in Spanish too.
Okay.
Pull the microphone down to your mouth. There you go.
Sorry. Okay. Considero que 8 países, Latinoamérica, Honduras, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Chile, México, celebran su independencia de 15 de septiembre al 15 de octubre, por cuanto existe una hermosa colaboración para celebrar nuestra comunidad latina al reunir a los jóvenes de manos y las madres de mujer a mujer en sí. En la comunidad de Beloved Asheville para celebrar una serie de eventos de celebración para compartir la cultura, el arte, la historia y las tradiciones latinas y para celebrar nuestra comunidad latina en Asheville. Nuestro grupo de base Frontación, nuestra comunidad y nuestra bueno, ¿cómo dice?
¿Dónde vas?
Aquí.
Estos grupos que vas a nuestra
No,
comunidad
aquí.
Conectan con instituciones más grandes.
Conecta con, ¿cómo? Instituciones más grandes como mano exhiben a través de sus asociaciones entre la escuela del condado de Montgomery y Wesleyan College. Vaya.
Por cuanto nuestra comunidad latina está orgullosa de nuestra cultura y nuestros antepasados, por cuanto apoyamos a través de nuestro amor, trabajo, tiempo y energía a la comunidad de Asheville de muchas maneras, por cuanto los antiguos mayas nos enseñaron a ver todas las personas y decir, tú eres mi otro yo, y por lo tanto buscamos encarnar esta verdad a través del intercambio, la comunidad y la profunda compasión que nos brinda este entendimiento. Por cuanto la migración es hermosa y sabemos que esta es la razón por la cual este país es lo que es hoy debido a la migración de personas de diferentes partes del mundo y las muchas contribuciones de todos estos pueblos. Por cuanto estamos aquí para el futuro y la seguridad de nuestros hijos, para trabajar duro, respetar y ser respetados por nuestros esfuerzos y honestidad, y por cuanto queremos lo que cada padre quiere para sus hijos, felicidad, oportunidad, y que no somos diferentes como personas, reímos y lloramos por las mismas razones, considerando que nuestros jóvenes deberían poder concentrarse en sus sueños y en cómo podrían compartir sus dones en lugar de crecer aterrorizados y con el temor de perder a sus familiares.
Por cuanto nosotros en la comunidad de Asheville siempre debemos trabajar para proteger a todos los que forman parte de la comunidad latina de ser blanco de odio, discriminación y sistemas de opresión. Por cuanto la ciudad de Asheville está trabajando para encarnar los valores de bienvenida y equidad y la celebración de todos los que llaman hogar a Asheville. Ahora, por lo tanto, yo, Mannheimer, alcalde de la ciudad de Asheville, proclamo septiembre y octubre como meses de patrimonio latina en la ciudad de Asheville y alerta a los residentes a participar en la actividad de Latina no sé cómo se dice. Latinx Heritage, en testimonio de lo cual he establecido mi mano y he hecho que el sello de la ciudad de Asheville, Carolina del Norte, se adhiera este 24 de septiembre del 2019.
Thank you so much for the proclamation, and we are very happy for all this, really for the recognition that the city is having to the community, the good community, because a lot of times in media they say that we are the bad people, and you can see there is a lot of youth try to make better the city, and people like myself or Norma then is try to make better this city. So the reason that we invite the city council to have this one in Spanish is because, like, even when we know then the city council is grown and we have more representation in the city. We don't have all the representation in the city, so we hope then in next year we can have somebody that can read in Spanish and speak our language too, the language that our mother teach us. And so other of the things that we are doing, we just came from an exhibition of indigenous art, and we hope, we dream that one day the schools are teaching our history too, because the kids is growing without identity because the schools are not teaching where we coming from. So today I bring a present to all you. So this is part of the brochure that we are making to teach the youth about our history. So I want to invite you to read this for learn about our culture too.
I join my friend Poncho and Amy and other friends from Beloved Asheville to thank you all for this recognition, and especially to have our youth. I've been working with them for 10 years and with the Latino community for 18 years. And I see positive changes, collaborations. I have to have deep appreciation and gratitude for the parents that trust us, the school system, personally, the leaders of the groups and the coordinators with the most precious gift, their children. And in these times, sometimes deposit that trust is not an easy task. So we are honored, and I hope you also feel honored that these kids have been willing to come and share. And I hope it's a good experience to listen Spanish for a few minutes, because for them, many of them that are here today, they have to listen English for many hours until they learn and they are bilingual. And I am honored that Dr. Baldwin and all the senior administrators took 4 years ago the risk to hire me. And I just find support and willingness to continue learning and willingness to have uncomfortable conversations while they're held with respect and with the voices that are there to build. And I think that's very important. We can make the table as big we can, but we need voices that they are transparent, clear, strong, and with willingness to build and to learn from each other. And I appreciate that willingness from you all, from Buncombe County Schools, and we will keep holding some non-easy conversations, but in the direction that benefit our students. This year, our group Manos, mentoring and nurturing our students, has the biggest enrollment ever. Up to date, we have 37 students. Many of them, they are newcomers. Many of them, they spend the whole day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. trying to acquire the academic knowledge they need, improve their English, and other ones that they are bilingual are helping, and of course Warren Wilson College is doing. But we welcome anybody to sustain this effort, and again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, hold on, before you go, on your way out, and I know you all do not have to stay for the rest of this meeting, which will be really long, so hopefully no one will kill me for doing this. But as you go out, will you each go by their microphone and say your name and tell us where you go to school? Will you do that? If you want to.
Por favor, en la medida que nos vamos retirando, si cada uno puede decir su nombre y la escuela a la que van. Y las mamás, el grupo al que pertenece. ¿Ok? Simple. Norma Durán Brown, Buncombe County Schools, Manos.
Maria Ruth Romero in Irwin High School.
Diana Miranda, Erwin High School.
Okay.
Bernice Castillo, Irwin High.
Nicolás Pérez, Irwin High School. José Edgar, Irwin High School.
Development here. And so even though we appreciate that Stacey wants to have this conversation, the point of the climate emergency declaration is for leaders to acknowledge that we're in a state of emergency. And so if we're going to put that off, then that doesn't really feel like it is a state of emergency. So, we're going to keep showing up, and we're going to keep trying to have this conversation because we don't feel like we have time to waste. And looking at the cabinet's report and looking at our current renewable energy resolution that was passed last year, we're only looking at a transition for how our municipal buildings are using energy use, which is great, and it's a huge step. That's only going to reduce our consumption by 1%. We need a true 100% renewable energy goal and carbon reduction across the city. And if we're going to reach a 2042 goal in the county, as they say, then I feel like our benchmark is really low for 2030, and we're not going to get there. And so that's our urgency. And, I think as municipalities, we need to do what we can to have stronger commitments. We're in a state with the biggest energy monopoly in the country. That's Duke Energy. We shouldn't be giving them a seat at the table. We should be doing what we can to bring everybody else to the table and have a broader conversation. So we're looking to you as elected leaders to become advocates for the climate emergency mobilization so that you can lead other cities in the state and national government. We don't need a detailed plan or other people's opinion to tell us, or to hopefully tell you, that we are in a climate emergency. We're just wasting time. So, thank you.
All right. Anyone else wishing to? Yes, sir.
Hi, continuing that point, my name is Patrick Berger. I'm a lifelong resident of Asheville. I would like to share some words that Greta Thunberg spoke at the UN Climate Emergency meeting just this weekend.
Sorry, we're having timer issues. Hold on one.
And added to the record, her statement I found was very resonant. I hope I can bring the emotion and sincerity that she has brought to this movement. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet, all of you come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet, I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We're at the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth? How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough, when the politics and solution needed are still nowhere in sight. You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency, but no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil. And that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points. Most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us. We who have to live with the consequences. To have a 67% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees global temperature rise, the best odds given by the International Panel on Climate Change, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018. Today, that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? With today's emission levels, that remaining 200, okay. You get the point, she's 16, she is our leader. Not our leader, that's a little strong.
Thank you.
This is an emergency, act like it.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the motion to approve the consent agenda? Yes.
My name is Kim Roney. Today I stand in awe and gratitude for the courage of our local Sunrise Movement and our students who requested urgency and appropriate response toward their climate strike at City Hall on Friday. And I hear the request for a climate emergency. A proclamation of climate emergency could have been part of this consent agenda because it should and I hope will be a unanimous decision. Climate change and migration is impacting every part of our lives. And I see this woven into many of the items on the council agenda tonight. A discussion about a hotel moratorium will hopefully be an opportunity to address the strain the tourism industry has had on our natural resources. The council election and primary decisions will impact our access to fair elections that unite us on common issues and allow us to hold our elected officials accountable for decisions that impact our entire community. And in the midst of this critical turning point with the city, county, state, and world, this is exactly the time to have this conversation, respond to moral outcry, to do the hard work, and to get this in motion. This requires a social attitude adjustment. It's going to require our personal attitude adjustments. It's going to require coordinating with people across the state of North Carolina to hear the call to care for Mother Earth and each other while demanding environmental justice and economic mobility with all of our neighbors. Thank you.
All right, anyone else wishing to, thank you guys. Anybody else wishing to speak on the motion to approve the consent agenda? All right, if not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No, okay. All right, we're going to move on to the public hearings agenda, and the first item on the public hearings agenda is a continuation of the public hearing to consider the conditional zoning of 3 parcels from Central Business District to Central Business District Expansion Conditional Zone for the construction of a mixed-use building at 72 Broadway Avenue and 61 and 67 North Market Street. So as we enter the public hearings portion of the agenda, the format is the same for speaking. You will state your name and have up to 3 minutes, and Maggie will try to operate her timer to keep track of the amount of time people are speaking. And again, we have sign-up sheets tonight just to try to organize this a little bit better. I do not yet have the sign-up sheet for 72 Broadway, but I will shortly. And this particular item is continued from the last City Council meeting where we had a very lengthy public hearing on this item and heard from everyone who did want to speak on it at that time. But we will, as we mentioned, take public comment again tonight. And Jessica Bernstein, our planner, is here to talk to us about this project briefly, I assume. Oh, and I'm sorry, we're limiting the public hearing comments on this item to the aspects of this project that have changed since last time. I don't know if you're able to speak to that, but I know the applicant.
Okay, thanks, Mayor and members of the council and members of the public. Just to briefly summarize the proposal, since this was discussed at length at the meeting on September 10th, it's a proposal for a new mixed-use building that has a mix of uses in it, 138 lodging rooms, 37 residential units that include designated affordable units both for sale and for rent, a small amount of retail space, and 126 structured parking spaces. Due to the lodging use and the size of the project, it's required to go through this conditional zoning process from Central Business District to Central Business District expansion. I won't go into the details of the project again, just to state that at that last meeting, the basic premise of what was mostly discussed as far as concern had to do with just the general lodging use itself. And then everything else was primarily based on the impact to the farmers market. The sole vehicular access point for the project is off of North Market Street. And so there was a lot of discussion related to the existing footprint of the city market that is within that area. Staff indicated at that meeting that the current policy for vehicular access during special events that are approved with road closures, such as the city market, is that vehicular access would be prohibited. It would be limited regardless under the city's current policy. Additionally, the applicant proposed conditions that would restrict access during the market, just to make that extra clear, that they would not use that vehicular access point during the market time. There was a lot of discussion at that meeting about using the alley for vehicular access during those times of the market. That was not set into a condition per se. There was a lot of discussion about that. So the proposal stands as it was at that time, with the conditions that were written, with vehicular access being limited or being prohibited from that point on North Market Street during the times of the market. So they stand in their commitment to not allow vehicular access from that point.
Okay. So the B1 conditions have not, there's not a change.
No, the B1 conditions list that you had last time showed strike-through language. Because it was a bit in flux, and I've taken out the strike-through, and what you have in the conditions is just what was noted in red at that last meeting, and I can pull that up.
Oh, okay.
It mostly it's related to conditions 12 and 13. So this language that's shown here in red. It's a little hard to see on the screen. It's not new language. It's just we took out the strike through text that was in the original document. So it is
Still, condition 12, access to the city market will not be disrupted during the construction process and during the times of road closure associated with the city market in its current configuration on North Market Street in front of the development site. There will be no vehicular access to the development from the primary driveway on North Market Street except for emergency vehicles.
Okay. Does anyone on council have a question for Jessica before she sits down and the applicant speaks? Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. I'll be very brief and only address the new things and kind of leaving.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Derek Allen, and I represent the developer BPR on this project. I'm with Allen, Stahl and Kilborn law firm, and I'm gonna leave these conditions up because we have things to add to both of those based off of conversations that we've had with the two neighbor groups. At the hearing last time, I heard several things. I heard about the farmers market a lot. I heard about the alley, and I heard about hotel saturation. I'll address each of those points with new information. First is the farmers market, and I want to be clear, there's going to be no construction activities during the farmers market hours. So with number 12, which reads access to the city market will not be disrupted during the construction process, we'd actually like to replace that with language that was suggested by the farmers market representative so that it says, no outside construction activities will take place during city market operations 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Saturdays from April through the third Saturday in December, just so that we are crystal clear that construction activity will not take place during the farmers market. Similarly, we ended up with an inadvertent issue with the alley. When we prohibited access, which was already prohibited, but when we did it with a condition that said there would be no access to Market Street during the market hours, which is condition 13, we ended up creating an issue with, or perceived issue with, the alley to make very clear that there will be no access during the farmers market or during other times. We have now struck a deal with the Masonic Temple to provide access to the north side of the property through the parking lot. We have a traffic engineer to address that point today if there are questions. But we have a deal with the Masonic Temple so that emergency access or egress access during farmers market will occur to the north side of the property.
And what about access through the alley?
There will be no access through the alley. There's no access to the alley. It's there for normal alley purposes such as trash rollout. We had some questions about dumpsters in the alley. We know that dumpsters will not be allowed in the alley, so that's not going to happen. I don't foresee any changes to the alley use based on this property being placed at the end of that alley, other than the tip of that alley being closed in further. It's already closed in, and so where the developer owns both sides of the alley, that short portion will be closed, but the remainder of the alley use is proposed to be unchanged. To make that very clear, we would propose to add a sentence on to the end of existing condition 13 dealing with that access, where it says, instead, ingress and egress to the site shall be routed to the north of the site through the parking lot currently owned by the Masonic Temple. The last thing I wanted to bring up, so I'm hoping that addresses all farmers market concerns. We do not want to impact the farmers market at all, and we believe those two conditions handles that. We don't want to impact anybody's use of the alley, whether they're parking in it or putting their empty kegs out there or the trash out there. We don't propose any changes to the use of the alley. I want to make that very, very clear. The last issue was about hotel saturation in general, and during the 2 weeks that we actually commissioned a market study report and had that sent to each of you, and I hope you had some time to look at it. And what it makes very clear, this is using hard data. The market has never been stronger. The recession, our hotel market still thrived during the recession. The numbers are clear. We got this report around in a week. Even with the hotels that are in plan, if you can look at that report, 80% and higher occupancy is forecasted. The average daily rate is forecast to be $195. That's even with those hotels in planning and putting this one in line. This is the highest in all of North Carolina. The demand is absolutely here. The last thing I want to hit on is the affordability part, because I think that got lost in the hearing last time. If we're going to have this kind of balance between our hospitality uses and the draw that this community has, we have to be able to balance that off. And it's not just about giving money to the Affordable Housing Fund. It's not just about cutting checks. It's about actually building units. And this project does that. There are 37 residential units proposed, 22% of which will be affordable housing. Not just barely affordable housing, but 60% AMI affordable housing. And not for 20 years like was mentioned in the market study that the city just put out, that was just reported on. We're talking about for 50 years. 50 years committed to that number of affordable housing units in downtown. It's unheard of. And some of those units are even designed to be owner occupied. It hits all those points. On the back side of this moratorium that I expect to go through tonight, we're going to have some objective criteria for hotels. And I hope that it includes a lot of things that we've included here. And I hope that you will see that that's what we're forecasting, and you'll agree to approve this project tonight. Thank you.
Derek, I have a question. You did forward the council the study that the hotelier commissioned, and I had a hard time understanding some of the data points. It looked like it did a deep dive into the Airbnb market in the area. Is that what is included in that?
That's included as an additional point. That's the last bullet point of those last 3 pages.
Yes.
Are dealing with the Airbnb market.
So, I mean, it seems to be looking at that because there is an encroachment, I guess, from the hotelier's perspective of the Airbnb market into, I mean, something has to be considered for a hotelier, can't be dismissed at this point.
I think what I think what that report would show is that the Airbnb market doesn't put a measurable dent into the hotel occupancy rates, despite the fact that the Airbnb numbers will rise. Yes.
Yeah, they're significant on there.
And Derek, I had a question as well. The plans that we have from last time don't show an access from the parking deck out onto the Masonic Temple parking lot, so that would be a design change. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I do have a schematic I can pass up and up.
That's fine. Just making sure.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for the applicant before we go to the next phase here? Okay.
And I would like to reserve some time if there are new items to address based on comments coming forward. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, so we're going to resume the public hearing on this item. Again, we heard a lengthy public hearing on this item at the last meeting. We would like the public comments at this meeting to specifically address any change to this project. So what we heard tonight the change is that, again, there will be no access to the project on Market Street interfering with the market on Saturday mornings, but instead of that Saturday morning access to the hotel portion being through the alley, it will be through the Masonic Temple parking lot off of, no, yes, I'm wrong.
Just to point out that while that would be a design change, it's not a change to the site plan. And the only facade that would be affected is an internal property line, so there would not be any technical or design review concern with that.
Thank you.
Mayor, before we dive into public comment, I'd like to go ahead and put a motion on the table, if that's all right.
Yes, that's procedurally correct.
Okay, all right. I move to deny the conditional zoning request for the project known as Create Broadway from Central Business District to Central Business Expansion District for the construction of a new mixed-use building, and find that the denial is reasonable, is in the public interest, and is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan in that, 1, the project is primarily lodging in use and as such does not meet the comprehensive plan goal of a diverse and sustainable mix of uses in the downtown, as it would contribute to a growing concentration of lodging uses and loss of opportunity for other new uses. And 2, the proposed access to and from the development is not sufficient.
Second. Okay, Keith and BJ both. Yep. All right, we have a motion to deny with 2 seconds. But if you still would really like to talk about this project, you are absolutely welcome to do that. And the first person I've signed up to speak, but only on the change since last time, which is the Saturday morning access being through the Masonic Temple parking lot rather than the alley. Mike McCreary.
Thank you. My name is Mike McCreary, and I represent the management of Asheville City Market, and I have just 3 very brief comments. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the efforts by the developer to avoid any negative impacts on the city's downtown farmers market. Thank you for that. I would like to confirm that change in number 12, based on conversations that I had with a representative of the developer, there'll be no construction activity at all during market operations. And there is an odd reference in 13 that I would prefer not to see there. The reference is to a reconfigured market. There are no plans to shift, move, change the market's configuration. I think that sort of implies that there might be some change pending. So if this were to go forward, it would be...
I see the reference to current configuration. During the times...
To say it's in current configuration, to me, suggests that there might be an alternative configuration. That's all I'm planning on making. Thank you for your time.
Charles Krackelberg, a.k.a. Chuck Krackelberg. Okay.
My comments just got a lot briefer, so I'll make this really quick. My name is Charles Krackelberg. I work with Cellular Architects. The owners of 52 Broadway Street are currently working with Cellular Architects to renovate their historic 3-story brick building, which affronts the alley, and their comments pertain to that. The owners of 52 Broadway Street continue to be concerned about the impact of the proposed Create 72 Broadway development on safety, traffic congestion, and day-to-day functions of business along the alley. They have asked Cellular Architects to share the following comments on their behalf, and this is outside of ingress and egress now being taken off the table. There's questions that they have pertaining to how the alley will be used. Point number 1, anything more than minimal use of the small alley between Broadway Street and North Market Street will be a detriment to neighborhood businesses and to public safety. It will be difficult for solid waste trucks to service a project the size of the proposed development off this tiny alley. The alley contains high voltage electric service connections and gas main connections for properties fronting Broadway. These connections will be at greater risk of being hit by vehicles if at some time in the future Create 72 Broadway were allowed to use the narrow alley as some sort of thoroughfare. It's vague. Again, no ingress or egress, but the idea of moderately sized and even smaller trash receptacles or vehicles rather are a concern. The alley is not wide enough for two-way traffic. I think that was probably discussed previously. And the last point is that the owners of 52 Broadway have not received any detail nor information regarding how Create 72 Broadway proposes to use the alley. They therefore object until they learn more regarding the following. How would Create 72 Broadway intend to use the alley? What is the anticipated traffic, noise, increased maintenance, and other impacts? Can the developer of Create 72 Broadway provide a document outlining their commitments to adjoining property owners to mitigate any negative impacts? And finally, are there specific ways in which the alley may be modified by Create 72 Broadway in the future, including the alley's potential closure or any potential remaining access to the garage that may continue to exist? So it's more questions that they wanted to raise than definitive direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, just with respect to, I'm sorry, I was speaking to the mayor. With respect to the applicant and those who are here, do you think it might be helpful to ask if there's anyone here in support, who signed up to support the project, just in the...
Yeah, and I do have some folks signed up in support of it. We do have a motion to deny pending here, but we will carry on. I have the next person signed up to speak is Peter Looper. Okay. The next person signed up to speak is Joe Archibald. And then John Banson, maybe? Hard to read your handwriting. It's after that.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm going to stray a little bit from the narrow focus of the access. I am very encouraged let me back up just a second. I am here tonight as a resident and architect of Asheville, also a renter in Asheville, and not as a member of Planning and Zoning Commission, which you and some of the public may know me as. I am very encouraged that the developer and the market have worked out an arrangement, which I think is very beneficial to both parties. Certainly am in favor of seeing the market thrive and continue. Like I said, I'm going to step away from that and just a little for, you said to keep it narrow, focused on new changes. I would draw your attention to two items in the consent agenda, D and E, where the city is partnering with other developers for affordable housing and or helping to have affordable housing brought forth in the city. And also the later agenda item regarding the affordable housing policies. It was less than 3 weeks ago that all of you and perhaps many members that are here this evening and myself sat in this very room and heard a somewhat distressing report on the state of affordable housing in this town and the urgent call for the city to find partners in that affordable housing as we move forward. And I believe that this developer can be seen as one of those partners. And I also hope that as the hotel moratorium discussion goes on, because I do believe it will happen tonight, that as that research and discussion continues about what policies come after, that hotel developers can be viewed as partners in the affordable housing discussion, because it's something that is sadly and desperately needed here in Asheville. Thank you.
Okay, the next person I mentioned is John Banson. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Okay. And then after that is Don Kreisman.
Hello, my name is John Bausoni.
Oh,
that's okay.
So far.
My red might be a little bit messy. I would just like to say that I'm in support of this development. I'm a resident. And I'd like you to consider the impact of short-term rentals. That if we block development like this, the cost of housing in Asheville has continued to rise over the last several years. And development like this, I think that it meets the zoning requirements. They've worked with the farmers market to mitigate those issues. And I just think about the long-term impact because we have a crisis with the short-term rentals. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Don Kreisman and then Nina Tovish.
My name is Dawn Creason. I'm going to adjust my comments based on the information that was given today. I just would like to say that the developers of Create 72 Broadway have been communicating that they mean the market no harm. Well, if that is the case, they've had enough time, money, and staff to provide written documents that are binding, recordable, and enforceable, not only for the market's protection, but to the other businesses that are affected by this project. To my knowledge, this has not been done. Instead, efforts have been made to push through this project before the moratorium vote. Projects of this magnitude need to be thought out and not rushed. I encourage the council to vote no on Create 72 Broadway and vote yes for the moratorium. It's not just the city's future you hold in your hands, but future generations as well. Remember, thank a farmer for what you eat and wear. We do it because we love it. And it's not always about the money for us. If it was for the money, you would be hungry, naked, and sober.
Nina. Okay. Okay, and then this person is Mr. or Ms. Jaggers, and your first name is not, I couldn't read it. I'm sorry.
My name is Maddie Moore, and I wasn't signed up with, but you keep talking about affordable housing. We can't find it. You put us out of our neighborhoods, and when you say we're gonna move back in, we can't afford it. That's my, that's what I want to say.
Thank you. Okay. Is there a Mr. or Ms. Jaggers? Okay. Well, so this isn't like Congress where you get to yield the floor. Everybody just gets 3 minutes, unless we have some other rules for if there's a group. But I have Bryn Estelle, and the next would be Tanya De Leon, if that's an it. I don't do. I know, that's not good. Just really good.
Hi, how's it going? It's always, thank you for your time. It's always appreciated. I was unaware of qualifiers before I signed up to speak on this topic, but I'm not going to talk for very long. I think that there's a lot of excitement and momentum here today for the hotel moratorium, and given there's a sense that is long overdue, and given that attitude, I think a lot of folks do not want to see one more squeak on through, right? We do not want to see the character and history of this town compromised any further. We do not want to see the downtown farmers market compromised, and it is unfathomable to me that a development of this scale could not compromise those operations. This is a lovely space we got here, by the way. Thank you very much. I would urge you to deny and vote no. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next person is Tanya De Leon.
I'm also giving my time. We were told that we couldn't do that.
If there are 3 people signed up to speak, that will yield their time to one person. They can speak for up to 10 minutes. Yes. The next person is Schiffer Allers, and then Jordan Allers.
My name is Schiffer Allers. I'm an owner of Momentum Gallery, a business located at 52 Broadway Street. Momentum Gallery is an art gallery featuring the creations of approximately 40 artists, the vast majority residing locally and regionally. I also represent them here tonight, and in addition, I've been in close communication with other property and business owners on our block, so I speak on behalf of them as well. I want to thank City Council for your commitment to making Asheville the best that it can be. We certainly appreciate you and the ability to speak at this forum. We are not opposed to hotels in general, and we believe they have the ability to make Asheville more tourist friendly. The idea of this hotel is something we are open to. We appreciate the magnitude of this project and its benefits, but also its complexities and the possibility of its negative impacts. The issue was and remains to be that we have raised concerns about the use of the alley, and the developer still has not provided satisfactory answers. In the last meeting, the developers promised council that they would address this lack of communication and engage in a dialogue with us, and this has not yet happened. In fact, after one of us got a vague email, not a dialogue, about their current intent, which was not in any way an actual commitment, we asked 3 specific questions 2 weeks ago, and we have yet to receive a response. I hope the developers of 72 Create are not attempting to intentionally mislead City Council with promises about working with the community. That would certainly raise a red flag about other promises that may be made. We would like to point out the tremendous investment and commitment to this community that the many property and business owners on Broadway have contributed over the years. We are not developers trying to make money by making vague promises or statements of intention. We're not going to flip our properties to new owners, and we don't want to leave the community to deal with the aftermath if any intentions change or promises are broken. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jordan Allers.
My name is Jordan Allers.
I live in North Asheville, and I'm a fourth-generation Ashevillean. I'm the owner of Momentum Gallery located at 52 Broadway Street. I've worked to develop the Asheville arts community over the last 20 years and worked with thousands of artists during that time. My business partners own property on both sides of the alley. We are concerned about alley access and its safety. We were told after the last meeting we would have answers to our concerns. Although we requested Derek Allen, representative of BPR Properties, to answer 3 basic questions, we did not get a response. We've been working and living in this area, helping to grow downtown Asheville into a thriving destination we can all be proud of. We deserve written answers and firm commitments from this developer on the specific ways in which Create 72 plans to use the alley, the anticipated traffic volume, noise, increased maintenance, and other impacts related to these potential uses, the commitments that the developer is making to adjoining property owners to mitigate any negative impacts and remedies if they do. We ask that City Council have the developers provide reasonable answers to the concerns of the city and neighboring property and business owners in writing. Because that still has not happened, in spite of the developer's promises in the last council meeting, we urge City Council to delay consideration on 72 Create until we know exactly what the impact will be to our businesses and residences already inhabiting downtown Asheville. Thanks so much.
Okay, the next person signed up to speak is, okay, it's Mr. or Ms. Darden. Okay, Mr. You'll tell us about your first name.
Yes, my name is Colgate Darden. No one expects the first name, so thank you for hearing us. I was at the last meeting, and I would suspect that if council didn't have the votes to pass it last time, the small changes that they've made this time aren't going to be enough to convey. However, there are 2 issues that I do want to focus on briefly. One is the construction impact on the market. The only concern is not the hours of operation of the construction, but the impact on the street that it's going to have as well. The Jersey barriers that are going to be off the sidewalk and in the road and all these kinds of things. But the main thing that concerns me is that no matter whether you're for this hotel or against the hotels in general, the parking access is just inadequate. The whole idea that you would not be able to access the only garage in this building for any number of hours on a given day every week for eternity is setting up a terrible problem. Thank you.
Just to clarify, once again, there is a motion to deny, but also I believe there is access on the Masonic Temple side of the parking lot. There is going to be access if theoretically this were to become a hotel on that site. The next person signed up to speak is Matilda Bliss. And then the person after that is Elvia Diaz. Did I say that right? Yes? Yes.
I'm Matilda, and it's pretty clear from the comments and from the presentation that nothing's really changed and that the explanations are insufficient. Vote against this.
Thank you. Elvia. And then I think it says Cat New, but
that's correct.
you don't want to, okay. Then Charles Warner.
Hi, Elvia Diaz. Even with types of farming, we're entering into something called natural agriculture. If no one has heard about it, I will just briefly mention it. So farming, yes, very important. With the language mentioned, I'm in agreement with everyone. The semantics are very important to define here as we continue to build hotels where we don't necessarily need them. 36, 37, and 22% is not good enough. We know that we can do better. We can make them do better. I think that the language needs to be more defined, more clearly defined. Legal language contract law. Come on now. We're dealing with lawyers, a lawyer-owned building. He can do better. I mean, right?
Thank you. Charles Warner. Maggie, do we need to leave the computer on the lectern? Okay.
I'm Charles Warner. I've been a longtime resident of Asheville, almost 4 months now. Love the farmers market. The city needs money. All cities need money. Money comes from taxes. Taxes hopefully come more from tourists, not me. So to that point, I did not object to the hotel. I did have some concerns about the impact of the hotel on the market. A lot of those have been addressed. Some new ones have been brought up tonight. Hopefully, the city will give them time to address it. So my comment is, I would ask the council not to deny the hotel and to exclude them from the moratorium until there's time to resolve all the issues. If it turns out that the resolution can't be reached, there's plenty of time at that point to start over and eliminate the hotel. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, and the final person I have signed up to speak on this is George Heining. And was this the time that...
I'm the infamous George Heining.
Okay, so the three of you were yielding your time so he could speak for 10 minutes? On the change.
I will only take 5 minutes.
Okay.
And we'll be discussing change for sure. I appreciate your time, council. My name is George Heining, and I'm with MHA Works Architecture, the firm that's part of this project. I want to state two things. One, I do not know the developers. I've met them for the first time this evening. And the second, I'm not a designer. I'm not an architect. I don't design buildings. That's not what I do. I don't work with that side of my brain. I'm on the other side. And what I focus on is in community enhancement. I focus on the communities that our offices are located in and bettering those communities. I evaluate the communities. I determine the problems that they're facing. I try and find solutions, and I work with local community members to implement those changes and better the communities. I've been looking at Asheville for a while, and based on the conversations through the leaders, the chamber, through economic development, there's three very clear, critical problems this community is facing. Surprisingly, too many hotels is way down on the list. The three we're faced with are: one, we desperately need 22 to 55-year-old working class to improve the tax base, to expand the diversity of this community that's focused on tourism, and to create a year-long sustainable living community, and also to be able to provide employees for companies that want to come here, which they do, which leads to the second problem. There's no Class A office space. If a company wanted to move here, they've got no place to hang their shingle. They've got no employees to hire. They want to come here, but they can't. And the third problem is affordable housing development. The beauty is there's one solution that solves all of these problems. And sir, you said it before and you're 100% right. Mixed-use development. Mixed-use development can provide revenue, it can provide office space, it can provide residential space from market rate, and because it's so profitable, you can piggyback on it and get affordable housing, which is really the only way, unless you want to do a massive bond, like where I'm from in Durham. They're doing $650 million to make a change. That's a big move. The other way is to piggyback on these types of developments. I have been trying 4 years to get developers to come up here and do mixed-use development, and they won't, no matter how promising it is, no matter how beneficial it is, because they've got more projects they can shake a stick at in Charlotte and the Triangle. Why would they come up here and do a spinoff? It's a challenge to get them to come here. Despite trying and trying, I finally got traction. I'm so close. I've got one developer that's bought a shopping center here in town and wants to do mixed-use development focused on office. I've got another 2 developers doing the same, looking at performance and properties. Tonight, before you do not have a hotel. You have a mixed-use development. And I know it's not the exact recipe you're looking for. It's still a mixed-use development. And that mixed-use development is designed specifically with Asheville in mind, with the community in mind. And it's so designed in that manner that planning unanimously approved it. On top of that, it has got 20% dedicated to affordable housing. I have never seen a proposal anywhere near that from any developer for mixed use. It's unheard of. This project is on a silver platter, and those developers I mentioned earlier, they're watching right now. And if this project is turned down, they are going to run away, and we're not going to hear from them for another 5 years. I drove 3.5 hours to make this one point, so please bear with me. The negative impact turning this project down will be far greater than the negative impact of approving one more hotel. Please, change your vote, change your motion, approve this project, do your moratorium, we'll roll up our sleeves, we'll solve the problem, but don't sacrifice a beacon $50 million economic development project just for what? I appreciate your time, and unless you have questions, I'm going to drop back to Darren.
Thank you. Okay, all right. Those are the folks that I had signed up for the public hearing on this item. We have a motion to deny with a second and a second. Any other questions from any members of council before we vote? Or comments, other, or questions? No? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to deny, say aye. Aye. Okay, seriously, with the clapping. You are being rebels tonight. All right, well, let's maybe it's this venue, I don't know, because there's like lots of clapping events that happen here. The next item is a public hearing to consider rezoning 940 West Chapel Road from Neighborhood Business District to RS8 Residential Single Family High Density District. And Sasha Vertinsky, Sasha, say your last name.
Vertinsky.
Thank you. Is here to talk to us about this project.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Yes, I'm Sasha Vertinsky. I'm a planner, and this is a rezoning application for 940 West Chapel Road, which is in Shiloh. I'm going to scroll through some of these. This parcel is half an acre. It is currently zoned neighborhood business. It is at the intersection of London Road and West Chapel Road. And currently on that parcel, and the request, excuse me, is to rezone this parcel to RS8, which is Residential Single Family High Density District. Currently on this parcel is a small commercial building that has been there for decades. It is 2,600 square feet. It, in the past, in years, decades past, not currently, but had served the Shiloh community as a grocery store. As a part of this rezoning, our department determined that we would need to change the future land use map, which is was adopted by council with the Living Asheville plan. So currently it is categorized as neighborhood center. And currently it is categorized as neighborhood center. Demolish the building, but that is the current conditions there now. Since there now. This is consistent with both the comprehensive plan and council goals, and staff is in support of the rezoning.
Was this zoned neighborhood business because of the time zoning was enacted? There was zoned neighborhood business because of the time zoning was enacted. There was this use as a market at that location.
I don't know if it's a market, but there was a business. I think there have been other businesses since then.
Okay.
We have neighborhood business throughout in some of our other neighborhoods. There has been a trend in the last couple years to where people have requested these rezonings. I did a couple in the Weekend neighborhood, similar situation.
To go to residential.
To go to residential. But places like Montford, you know, this is the kind of place where you might have a restaurant. You know, we do know that there are neighborhood scale businesses that succeed as well. We do know that there are neighborhood scale businesses that succeed as well.
And the applicant, does the applicant want to speak?
Mayor, council, staff, I'd like to thank you for your time. We are asking for a rezoning at 940 West Chapel from neighborhood business to RS8. We will be removing a dilapidated building and replacing it with new homes. With this project will be sidewalks added to the area, which is a very high pedestrian use. Also, I've agreed with the Shiloh Community Center to do a plaque somewhere on the property to represent what this, I think it was a grocery store for years for the Shiloh community. So I've agreed to do that as well for the historical issue at hand.
Will you state your name?
Car swipe issue at hand.
Will you state your name?
Car swipe's good.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant? Thank you. Thank you. All right, if there aren't any other questions of staff or the applicant, I'm going to open the public hearing. And the first no, this is regular public hearing. So the first person signed up to speak is Norma Baines.
Good evening. My name is Norma Baines, and I live in the Shiloh community, and I'm also the assistant liaison for the Shiloh Community Association. To the Honorable Mayor Manhauer and the City Council, thank you for this opportunity to speak, Council. Thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening in support of the rezoning of the property at 940 West Chapel Road for neighborhood business, from neighborhood business to RS8. It is our understanding that the owner will be building houses there. We would like to thank Mr. Swesgood for contacting the Shiloh Community Association about the request for changing in zoning and the plan to build houses at 940 West Chapel Road. We hope that Mr. Swesgood has referred to the Shiloh 2025 plan that explains the character of the Shiloh community. However, we are requesting to see all plans for the houses. We are aware that the plans may be level 1 staff approval. We would like for the Shiloh Community Association and all communities in Asheville to be notified and see the plans before the city staff approve the projects that is level 1. We are concerned by the planning draft that we received that appears to be hut-like structures that do not support our 2025 vision for houses that support the historical character of our neighborhood. We are also concerned about the potential traffic control problems at the high traffic intersection with a high density development. The shallow communication is not in support of staff approval level 1 projects that look like huts, like the ones that were put in our community about 2 or 3 years ago. This is not the character of the shallow community that we are trying to preserve. Thank you. Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Vanessa White, and then Diane Griffin. Vanessa White? Oh, okay. Diane Griffith? Oh, okay. Diane Griffith? Nina Tovish? And then after that I have, oh, no, that's it.
Good evening. My name is Nina Tovish. Thank you, council members, for the opportunity to speak. I'm embarrassed to say that this is the first I've heard about this potential neighborhood development. I live 2 blocks away, essentially 2.5 blocks away from this intersection. And I have eyeballed that dilapidated building for 6.5 years now, wondering what was ever going to become of it. It's an absolutely perfect plot for residential development. It's in a great neighborhood plot for residential development. It's in a great neighborhood. It's wonderful. It's also a perfect opportunity for mixed-use development, particularly given the historic legacy of that neighborhood. What would be wonderful to see on that location would be a mix of retail, restaurant, something or other, first level, and then maybe multi-unit behind. I unfortunately have not had the opportunity to see the proposal in any detail. I'm definitely in favor of development of this parcel of land. It's crying out for residential use. But given its historical legacy as a commercial use, I would love to see a mixed-use development happen there. That's my 2 cents. I wish I were better informed on this project. I walk past it on a regular basis. I'd love to see a more detailed development. RS8 on that area, if it gives us 5 houses maybe on that lot, that's a pretty dense use of single-family residence. I think there's a higher and better use.
Okay, that's all the folks I have signed up to speak. To be clear, this is a straight up rezoning. This is not what we're used to. We're used to hearing conditional zoning application zoning. This is not what we're used to. We're used to hearing conditional zoning applications, so there is not actually a proposal for us to consider. This is just a change of use of this property so that it can be used for residential purposes. Do I have any other questions or comments from council yes?
Well, I have a comment. On the left side of the photo, you see a patch of grass there. That's actually a bus stop there. So whatever future use we decide, I really like to see that a bus shelter there. It's very unsafe because it is a high traffic area.
Can you address the bus stop question?
And yeah, it's right there on the patch.
So since it is a straight rezoning, we can't require any additional things. As it is going to RS8, there are, I'm trying to think of side setbacks. And I did see the draft plan, so there will be a side setback. So I think there may be more room actually when a house is, if this structure is removed. That will be up to transit or our transportation department to put a shelter there.
Okay, good question.
Not a question, just a comment. More, I know it's a straight rezoning, but more often than not, we ask communities around the city to develop these plans and try to preserve or implement how they want their communities to look. And more often than not, we defer to those communities, and we ask that when people come into those communities, developers and whatnot, that they work with the community on what their vision is on how they want to preserve their community or promote their community. And, you know, we've had conversations since I've been here over the years of different communities coming in and referencing what their plans are for their communities, and we ask if the developer, if the individual who's asking for the zoning, whatever it may be, can work it out with the community to see if it can be a more cohesive vision for whatever they're planning in these communities. With that being said, I would hope that, even though it's at this point to council, that maybe the developer could go back to the community and see if they could come together on some sort of comprehensive vision that supports what the community wants to see. I would hate to live in that community and know that my community association didn't want what was coming up. Not necessarily that they didn't want housing, because that's what it's going to be, but the fact that they don't like the fit for their community. And I think if we bounced around to any other community in this city, we would see a certain affinity to lean on what the community wants. Say, for instance, a Montford. If Montford were to come and say, we don't like your vision for what you have for our community, I could definitely see a tone of how people would treat this. And so I'm going to treat this in that way. Hopefully, the community association and developer can come to a more cohesive vision. But I would just want to leave it at that. See where it goes from there.
So it sounds to me like there are plans, but this is, I'm looking at staff. There are plans that you have seen, but this is a straight up rezoning, so we don't have those plans to consider. And it sounds like Ms. Baines is saying she supports, on behalf of the Shiloh community, the rezoning, but is concerned about the potential plans maybe you've seen or you haven't seen. Would the applicant consider a continuance to the next city council meeting to have an opportunity to meet with the neighborhood about the specific design of what's planned for the site that it sounds like needs to be addressed from what I'm hearing? Not so much an objection to the rezoning necessarily, but a concern about just having a look at what you're proposing.
Yeah, but they have a copy of the plans, and I've been waiting to get before council several months.
Okay.
So, when would be the next meeting?
October 22nd. October 22nd.
May I ask developers some questions?
Yeah, would you come up to the mic and
Thank you, sir. So just, you said the neighborhood has the plans. Have you all had any sort of meetings with the neighborhood association itself?
Yes, sir. I have met with them, and I took the plans.
Hi there, I'm Lawrence Waller. I live in North Asheville. I'm here to speak about something else tonight, but I just wanted to say that I'm so happy that the speed limit on Amboy Road is being reduced. I bike along there, and I think it's going to be a lot safer. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
anyone else wishing to speak on the motion to approve the consent? Yes, ma'am.
Dan is. It's coming and going.
My name is Ashley McDermott. I'm an East Asheville resident, and I just wanted to echo the point about the climate emergency resolution and emphasize why we're here today. Just to stress again, there were over 400 people that gathered in the middle of the day outside of City Hall on Friday. And that's students across the city. Asheville High School organized a walkout, parents, teachers, people leaving work. And that's because this was a huge, massive day of organizing, because we are looking for action, not a pat on the back or not, like acknowledgement that people are there. We're in communication with other organizers across the state, because obviously we're in a state where we're inhibited by the legislature. And so rather than waiting for hopefully things to change in 2020, we really are looking to our local governments to take action. And we appreciate all the great things that are on the consent agenda as far as renewable energy and some of those initiatives that go, but we really need to consider this time where we're looking at a hotel moratorium, where we're looking at this crossroads that we're at in the city with how we're developing, and look at not just energy use, but our entire modes of consumption. So talking about transportation and green infrastructure, our housing, our regenerative farming, local food, our waste, all the waste that's coming from commercial development here. And so even though we appreciate that Stacey wants to have this conversation, the point of the climate emergency declaration is for leaders to acknowledge that we're in a state of emergency. And so if we're going to put that off, then that doesn't really feel like it is a state of emergency. So, you know, we're going to keep showing up, and we're going to keep trying to have this conversation because we don't feel like we have time to waste. You know, and looking at the Cadmus report and looking at our current renewable energy resolution that was passed last year, we're only looking at a transition for how our municipal buildings are using energy use, which is great, and it's a huge step. That's only going to reduce our consumption by 1%. We need a true 100% renewable energy goal and carbon reduction across the city. And if we're going to reach a 2042 goal in the county, as they say, then I feel like our benchmark is really low for 2030, and we're not going to get there. And so that's our urgency. And, you know, I think as municipalities, we need to do what we can to have stronger commitments. We're in a state with the strongest biggest energy monopoly in the country. That's Duke Energy. We shouldn't be giving them a seat at the table. We should be doing what we can to bring everybody else to the table and have a broader conversation. So we're looking to you as elected leaders to become advocates for the climate emergency mobilization so that you can lead other cities in the state and national government. We don't need a detailed plan or other people's opinion to tell us, or to hopefully tell you, that we are in a climate emergency. We're just wasting time. So, thank you.
All right. Anyone else wishing to? Yes, sir.
Hi, continuing that point, my name is Patrick Berger. I'm a lifelong resident of Asheville. I would like to share some words that Greta Thunberg spoke at the UN Climate Emergency meeting just this weekend.
Sorry, we're having timer issues. Hold on one.
And added to the record, her statement I found was very resonant. I hope I can bring the emotion and sincerity that she has brought to this movement. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet, all of you come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
Never had any complaints as of yet, so, you know, I have full intention on doing this project right. I think Ms. Baines and the community don't want the houses in the back, and I think that's the main issue. You know, we're going to build a 1,320 square foot product on the front, and what she calls the huts in the back, I think it's what they don't want. As you see, the plan shows those, and I think that's the issue. And I feel like I have gone to the community, gave her the plan, met with them in Shiloh community, and so I feel like I've done my duty as a developer to educate the Shiloh community of what we were going to do. So I feel like I've done that.
I agree, he did come to us, but like I said, we didn't have the design, and that's where we have the problem. Once we saw the design, and I don't want to make a decision for the whole association, I would like for him to come back and talk to us, so all the officers can be there in the board.
But you do understand that if he comes back and the design is the neighborhood's issue, that we're not allowed to consider that when we make the vote. I mean, we hope I think it'd be great that you guys get back together and try to come up with some consensus, but you do have to understand that we're prohibited from looking at the design when we make the vote on the zoning.
Well, like I said in my report, I didn't object for the zoning. I put an objection for the design that he did. Now, if somehow way we can do this and talk to him and y'all approve the RSA, it's okay. But we need to get with him and talk about the design which he wants to put in our report.
So are you saying that you would be fine with us approving this tonight or without this next meeting?
As long as he's going to work with us with this design.
Can you all get together on that then?
Yeah, absolutely. We built houses right across on the street.
Yeah.
I want to be a good neighbor and work with it.
That's all we ask. That's all I'm asking. So if there's no objection for the community association for this vote to happen tonight, then let's do so.
Let's do it.
But you all
And like
build some sort of
those
relationship going forward on this.
accessory dwelling units, like them. They're good things.
Yes, but I hope you will work with the design.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, Keith, you want to make a motion then?
Sure. Make a motion to approve the rezoning request for the project known as 940 West Chapel Road from neighborhood business to residential single-family high-density district, RSA, and find that the request and resulting future land use map amendment for neighborhood center, the traditional neighborhood is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community, and that 1, it will support the redevelopment of the land. 2, it assigns a zoning designation that is more compatible with the surrounding properties. And 3, it will allow for the construction of single-family homes that are compatible with the surrounding neighborhood.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments before we vote? Great. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Our next public hearing item is a public hearing to consider rezoning 99999 Lakeside Drive from RS4 Residential Single Family Medium Density District to RM8 Residential Multifamily Medium Density District. And Videla is here to talk about this one.
Good evening. My name is Videla with the Department of Planning and Urban Design. This is a request. Let's see. Okay. For a property on the westernmost part of town. I'll orient you really quickly here. You can see on this map here, this is Patton Avenue going out of town, and Lakeside Drive sort of comes up here. This dotted red line, it's hard to see with the light here, but the dotted red line is the city limits. And this parcel here in the middle with the stripes is the subject property. It's about 3.7 acres. It's currently zoned RS4, and this slide is showing the wrong one. Here it is. It's currently zoned RS4. On the other side of this blue line is a different zoning district, RM8. The site is particularly constrained because, as you can see here, there's a river or a little stream that runs right through it. The applicant is interested in subdividing this to make parcels to build single-family homes, but the stream is a constraint, and they're looking to have more flexibility in the site, so they're requesting to rezone the site from RS4 to RM8, which is the zoning district across the street and compatible with the neighborhood. The proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan future land use map because it's a residential zoning district that allows for various housing types. And what's particularly applicable here is that the Living Asheville comprehensive plan says that flexibility should be encouraged in areas that could impact the natural environment, such as waterways. So the benefit here from the applicant's perspective in rezoning this to RM8 is that it reduces their front setback, so they're able to move the homes closer to the street, further away from the stream. So it'll be easier for grading, there won't be as many impacts on the stream, and they'll be able to have the homes closer to the street. staff finds this proposed rezoning is compatible with the existing neighborhood development and with the Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan. That concludes my report.
Anyone have any questions of staff? Does the applicant wish to speak on this application? Not a requirement, but.
John Hale, thank you for your time. I'm with Asheville West, the owner of the property. I just simply would like to ask that the city council approve this rezoning. This rezoning request is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. It's my understanding that Asheville Planning and Zoning supports this rezoning. Although the rezoning allows for multifamily units, we are not developing multifamily units. I have received several calls from the neighbors up and down Lakeside Drive, and I've responded to every call. We're looking to build 7 single-family homes ranging from 1,200 to 1,400 square feet, something that's a little more affordable in Asheville. Other than that, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any, I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't have anyone signed up to speak on this item. So I'm going to close the public hearing. All right, we have a motion.
I move to approve the rezoning request for the project known as 99999 Lakeside Drive from residential single-family medium-density district, RS4, to residential multifamily medium-density district, RM8, in order to support infill residential development, and find that the request is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, is reasonable, and is in the public interest in that, number 1, it allows for flexibility for infill residential development. 2, the proposed pattern of development is consistent with the current neighborhood character. And 3, the proposal provides environmental benefits by encouraging grading and development to take place further from the stream.
If a motion, do I have a second? Thank you. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Our next public hearing item is a public hearing to consider a temporary moratorium on hotel development approvals within the city of Asheville. And our planning director, Todd Oakwood-Cheney, is back where he's here. Maggie wrote you down as somebody who's going to talk about this. And then also, I don't have the sheet. Okay. So at least stall until I can get the sign-up sheet.
I would just say good evening. I think Brad Branham and I really presented the moratorium and the rationale for the moratorium at the last city council meeting, and we're here and available for any questions you have about that presentation or the planning process.
Okay, before I open the public hearing, are there any questions regarding this item?
Can I just clarify? So
don't run away.
So tonight we will vote on this?
Yes, tonight is the vote. So last time we set the public hearing for this item, and tonight is the public hearing and the vote.
We did have this mixed-use project before us tonight. I do hope that during the moratorium we'll take the opportunity to look at that issue of mixed use involving a hotel. This is the first kind of project like that we've seen. I personally don't have any framework to understand the trade-offs between affordable housing and market rate housing and hotel rooms, so I hope we can just explore that as part of this process.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, the first person signed up to speak on the motion to, or we don't have a motion yet, sorry, on the moratorium is Kristen Goldsmith. And then second will be Lawrence Waller. It's very clearly yeah.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Kristen Goldsmith, candidate for Asheville City Council 2020. Last week, I sent you all an email indicating my strong support for this moratorium, as well as a list of specific proposals I'd like to see council take up during this process. Tonight, I'd like to highlight a few of them. First, council should commission a series of studies to create a framework for new development standards regarding hotels. In particular, we need to define saturation. the point at which Asheville is deemed to be at capacity for hotel development. Based on those findings, council should use that information to regulate the density of lodging units within the city. Second, council should call for an economic impact study that looks at the availability of jobs with wages above $15 an hour. Our local economy is disproportionately made up of low-wage jobs, in particular those that serve the tourism industry. And this lack of economic diversity means that many Ashevilleans are permanently priced out of housing. Further, our monolithic dependence on tourism makes us especially vulnerable in the next recession, and our low-wage workers will bear the brunt of that pain. Third, council should commission an infrastructure study to determine the costs of tourism to the city, including traffic, parking, and wear and tear on streets. The findings of this study should be used to score a proposed development's impact on infrastructure. Projects with a high impact score would be required to contribute a percentage of the project's total value to a newly established transportation trust fund, which would help fund our public transit system, the construction of new bike lanes and greenways, and repairing streets and sidewalks. Finally, council should consider several revisions to our Uniform Development Ordinance that would outline clear expectations for future development in line with City Council's 2036 vision. Our current approach has had meaningful limitations, including our ability to attract mixed use, mixed income, and affordable housing development. This moratorium provides us an important opening. It can't just be a year without new hotels. We have to use this time to bring together not only council, but our city staff, our boards and commissions, and input from the community to ensure that future development is just and sustainable. We have to take a holistic approach to addressing the housing crisis in Asheville. That means prioritizing affordable housing. That means diversifying our economy with living wage jobs, and that means building up our transportation infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. So Lawrence Waller is the next person, and then Claire Hanrahan.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Waller. 2 years ago, I moved to DC, so I've just moved back home. And one of the reasons I went to DC was I was excited to go get a job, see the big city. I've lived in Asheville my whole life. But I tell you, it was a pretty busy and crowded and touristy place. So I was glad when I decided to move back here home, only to find, wow, there's a lot of tourists running around here too now. I think that I agree with several of the folks who've mentioned the saturation idea. I'm not necessarily sure how you would quantify that, but I think that a study should definitely be launched to find out whether or not Asheville has reached that saturation point. And I think that this year-long moratorium would be a really great idea to give us some time to figure out what Asheville should look like going forward. So I support the moratorium.
Thank you. So Claire Hanrahan, and then on deck is Tom Boren.
Hello, I'm Claire Hanrahan. Good to see you all again. Welcome to the neighborhood, and thank you to anyone who brought the council here. It's very nice. I support the moratorium. I also thank you, Brian. You came to the International Day of Peace in our lovely gardens across the way. And I also want to reiterate the call, the urgent call of the young women with the Sunrise Movement, because climate change is exponentially accelerating, and it is an emergency. And business as usual, that might include well, we do need homes for people. Every day we pass many people sleeping on our benches and in the doorways. And if you live downtown, as I'm lucky to do because I do live in affordable housing in the lovely Battery Park, many, many people are right outside our doors every day with nowhere to be. So it's a climate emergency. Business as usual needs to stop. We need to rethink our priorities. It's not about more hotels. We see lots of tourists coming through our garden. Many of them, it's their first sight in the city, understandably, because of the walkways they make. They're wonderful people. I love seeing them, and I wonder what is the carbon footprint of all those airplanes, flying them in and out. This is time to consider these things. So I hope this one-year moratorium will also address those very important issues of what's coming down the pike. If the young people say 11 years, if we don't act quickly and urgently, what kind of world are we making for the next generation? Thank you.
So, Mr. Horn, you wanted to, okay. And then the next person signed up to speak is Jane Foran. And then on deck is John Beatty.
My name is Jane Foran, and my husband and I have lived in downtown Asheville for about 2.5 years now. And we've been coming to Asheville for about 10 years. And to me, the character of the city is changing. I've worked in Los Angeles, in New York, and been to Boston many times. And there are times now when I go downstairs that I feel like I'm in Boston. It's very busy, and I understand tourism. I've been a tourist myself, and I can appreciate people wanting to come here. But I think too many. It's changing the character of the city. I tried to count the number of hotels that are presently here and being built, and I come up with at least 16 just in the central business district. Many on a corner you would see almost 3 of them. And it seems to me that most of these hotels, they're not being put up, they're not family hotels, they're by corporations. And those corporations are the ones that to me are going to make the most money or get the most out of these hotels, especially when it comes to the low-paying jobs that our citizens, have to put up with. Another issue that has probably been addressed, every time a hotel goes up, I wonder about our infrastructure as it concerns water use. The water, to me, it's changed just in the 2.5 years being downtown. Just the taste of the water. And I know in most hotels, they don't do anything about the taste of the water. They don't put filters in the basement or anything so that people can drink the water. And they bring in thousands and thousands of bottled water, which contributes to our trash. So that, along with, all the trash that a hotel creates anyways, and all the other infrastructure problems. So I am definitely for moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is John Beatty and then Amy Cantrell.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. My name is John Beatty, and I'm the Area Director for the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association. The Restaurant and Lodging Association is the statewide organization that represents the interests of 2,000 hotels across North Carolina. NCRLA supports local planning and zoning authority. In fact, we recently stood side by side with your representatives in Raleigh to oppose legislation that would repeal the city's authority to zone short-term rentals. We recognize that City Council has a responsibility to carefully review development proposals, including hotel proposals, in order to weigh the impact on the community, both negative and positive. We commend City Council for taking a long-term view of land use as it relates to ensuring a well-planned and livable community. We acknowledge the infrastructure challenges that residents, visitors, and commuters face, and we acknowledge the traffic, sidewalks, and other infrastructure challenges exist. We are concerned that the proposed study focuses solely on hotel development rather than the issue of overall land use planning and development in the community. We would urge Council to consider a holistic look at land use planning, including an analysis of transportation alternatives for residents, visitors, and commuters. We urge the city to take a broad look at the economic drivers in Asheville and the jobs created by various development and projects. Finally, since hotel development is already prohibited in Asheville without council approval, we believe that council does not need to take further action, such as imposing a moratorium. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. So Amy Cantrell's up next, and then Jonathan Wainscott.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Amy Cantrell. First, I want to thank you for the proclamation tonight. And it was so powerful and touching to have young people here that in a culture where often they receive a lot of hate and where they live in fear instead of experiencing their hopes and dreams fully. So I just want to thank you for making that time, and Brian for sharing that proclamation, and Mayor for inviting them to say their names, which is so very powerful for them to know that we see them and we hear them. So thank you. I want to talk about the hotel moratorium, which is close and dear to my heart because I know people who are suffering. I know people who are suffering in the city, and the council has to act. It's something I've learned from Greta Thunberg when she made her speech to the UN, and she said that basically there's not a choice, that we are living in dangerous times and we must act out of a moral duty to respond to these times that we're living in. And this is part of your moral duty tonight, is the impact that hotels are having both on our climate and on our city, a place that is hard to recognize after 2 decades of living here and working here and being right downtown on these streets every day. I know somebody who was living literally in a tent and building the Hyatt Hotel, and there are many people like that. I know people who are dying on these streets. I know people who are being criminalized for even using a blanket or a sleeping bag when they have no home. We have a moral duty to say that we are living in a climate emergency and we are living in a housing crisis in America and in Asheville, and we must take that seriously. This is a life and death issue. And we know that our Tourism Development Authority sidesteps City Council when we tried to get a penny of the hotel tax to go to housing. This is an extractive business, and our community is suffering. This is a life and death issue. So I want to call on you to take drastic action to save our city, to save our climate and our earth. And please, I'm pleading for you to listen to the voices of those who are suffering the most, our local people who are literally dying. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Okay, Jonathan Wainscott, and then after that, Darren Callahan.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Wainscott. Thank you for paying a little bit more attention to the use of the hotel occupancy tax, Mr. Haynes. Several months ago, you took it to, you took a very aggressive attitude towards the North Carolina General Assembly for the way that they'd sort of apportioned the hotel tax, and that wasn't correct. I just want to remind everybody here that the hotel occupancy tax was locally created. I know that the mayor said the other night that it was statutorily created, which may be legally true, but I think that it's more accurate to say that it was statutorily authorized. This was something that was done back in 1983, but it's been sort of ignored all the way up until today, and this is the problem that we have at hand. Putting the brakes on hotels, I think, is an okay thing to do. I don't object to it, but once it's over with, it's over with. This is your one shot to get this new policy right, and then after that, you can't do this again. So as you act to suppress and control development, you definitely have to look at what's driving demand, which is our hotel occupancy tax, which is completely out of our ability to really do anything. And although Julie Mayfield and Brownie Newman said that, the thing that we need to do is we need to go and petition our legislators to come and make this change for us. We're petitioning our legislators to make a local change for us, which is kind of ironic considering some of the other things that we talked about tonight. I just don't want to see this sort of keep away from the voters and the residents, like, oh, this is a state law, we can't do anything about it. I mean, we created it back in 1983, and the North Carolina General Assembly authorized it. They granted us the permission to do this, so we need to change it at the local level
and try to get some level of cooperation from the TVA to give up their ever-expanding mountain of money that is ever expanding the demand for all of the land in Asheville to begin with. And you'll never be able to deal with affordable housing when you actively make this the coolest place on the planet and you gotta come here. I mean, we're creating the demand to give that. I just hope that over the course of the year that 7 people on city council can get up to speed on the law of supply and demand. That would be fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Darren Callahan and then Karen Ramshaw. Oh, maybe I'm not saying your name right.
Good evening. I'm Darren Callahan. I want to thank you for proposing the moratorium. I hope you all heard a massive sigh of relief in the community when this was proposed. I think there were thousands of people that were relieved. During this time, if it's a year, I'd love to see it be longer, but if it is a year, I hope that studies will be conducted, studies that have been mentioned this evening, very effective studies to really tell us where we are and how we should go forward. If after the studies, real need for additional hotels, real need is identified, then we go from there. But I would like to see it based on need, not greed. There was a study mentioned earlier about 80% capacity in hotels. I don't see that as real need. 80% seems like there's still room. There's plenty of room. The need in this city seems to be affordable housing. That, I think, has to be the priority. I think others have mentioned this. Affordable housing has to be the priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Ramshaw is next, and then Nina Tovish. You don't need to. Oh, so then after that would be Kim Roney.
Hi, I'm Karen Ramshaw. I work with public interest projects. I believe it's really important to understand what we hope to accomplish. A moratorium is a gift to existing hotels. Basic economics, artificially hold down the supply of something and the price goes up. A moratorium will drive up the costs of hotels currently being planned and may encourage some developers not to go forward, although the rising hotel room prices may encourage others. I'm not sure the moratorium is going to serve as much more than a PR exercise, but I believe strongly that any real benefit will depend on how well we do that impact study. Studying the effects of tourism, one of the larger economic drivers for this area, is a great idea. We need to understand the benefits and the challenges of the tourist economy and how the larger community is affected. I love data and believe that quantifying information rather than relying on anecdotes could serve us well. But there's a danger, as they say, garbage in, garbage out. We need to be sure we take a comprehensive look at the issues we face. The demonization of hotels is simplistic and self-serving. If we want real change, we need to take an honest look at the issues and then take steps to address the true barriers to the creation of the city we say we want. Less than a third of the people coming into Asheville each day are tourists. More than twice that number live in the county and come into Asheville for work, services, and entertainment, contributing to traffic congestion, taking up valuable downtown parking, not spending money at local businesses like tourists do, and not paying city taxes. Asheville's the engine. How do we get the surrounding counties to contribute? Lack of affordable housing, sprawl, inequity, crumbling infrastructure, and inadequate transit coverage are not caused by hotels. Those are on us. Zoning, high costs, and NIMBYism do more to drive up the cost of housing than any hotel. I'd also like to point out one potential benefit of additional hotel development. At some point, lower performing hotels, older, outdated designs and amenity, will be ripe for conversion. And the best new use is housing. The Vanderbilt, the Battery Park are now low-income elderly apartments. Asheville Hotel is workforce housing. The old Interstate Hotel is residential condos. The American Court Motel on Merriman is lower-cost apartments. We talk about the problems of Asheville's success. My family moved here in 1966. In high school, we all look forward to getting out of this cow town. It's always something. I'm not in the hotel business, so a moratorium won't affect me one way or another. But the future of Asheville does matter to me and the 3 grandchildren I have who live in the city limits. Please make sure that the study gives us information we can actually use for real change. Thank you.
Thank you. So Kim Roney is our next speaker, and then Matilda Bliss.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor Kim Roney. I had some ideas of things that I wanted to say today, and then I heard so many good comments from my neighbors, and so I will share instead that I ran into neighbor David Nutter this afternoon as I was crossing Patton Avenue, and he reminded me that when we say no to something, it's important to think about what we could say yes to. And it caught me in an interesting situation where I was trying to think about what we could be saying yes to. And I hear a lot about what we need to say yes to. We need to say yes to housing. We need economic mobility. I know that my first 2 jobs here in Asheville were in the hospitality industry. I worked at the late great Richmond Hill Inn, and then I worked at the Inn on Biltmore Estate. So I'm familiar with the hospitality industry. I met wonderful people there, but I also saw the impact of jobs. And so as a policy advocacy committee member for Just Economics, I know that typically the hotel jobs aren't paying people enough to live here. So people are getting by on multiple jobs and their families are struggling. It puts a huge impact on our local governments like yourself to subsidize the housing, to subsidize childcare, and yet people are still struggling. So I think about the history of how we got some of these historic hotels and how people were coming here to get well. And now we're coming here to drink beer, and they're coming here. I mean, my family members come to visit, my friends come to visit. One of the great things about being in Asheville is that people come to see you. But I don't think that the beer culture is getting as well. And I know that we have a lot of people working on the wellness factor, but it's getting lost in this abusive relationship that we're having with our guests. And I'm thankful for the moratorium, but I hope that we can set the standard really high. I've watched you say no to things when it was really unpopular, just like tonight. But if we don't set the standard even higher, we're not going to be able to say yes to what we want. I'll also mention that I was encouraged at the Downtown Commission meeting that my neighbor Andrew Fletcher brought up some of the cities that are also seeing a lot of overnight guests. And by comparison, New Orleans has 36 overnight guests per local person. And that's, it looks like, annually. And then that's on average. Every day there's 36 visitors in New Orleans for every local. In Charleston, it's 56 to 1, and in Asheville, it's 42 to 1. And so I think about that, plus the Buncombe County 15 to 1, and I'm like, what are we gonna say yes to? Because I think that we're all looking for something that we can say yes to. I'd love for us to say, like when I was in Greensboro and I saw that the Self-Help Credit Union was investing in office space and housing. I think we could do that and say yes.
Matilda Bliss, and then next would be Elvia Diaz.
My name is Matilda, and I believe we can think beyond tourism and to people-driven economies. I wanted to read from 2 different reports. The first report is the International Panel on Climate Change, which reads, the report finds that limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius would require rapid and far-reaching transitions in land, energy, industry, buildings, transport, and cities. Global net human-caused emissions of carbon dioxide, CO2, would need to fall by about 45% from 2010 levels by 2030, which means reaching net zero around 2050. This means that any remaining emissions would need to be balanced by removing CO2 from the air. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is possible within the laws of chemistry and physics, but doing so would require unprecedented changes, said Jim Skia. And so that's big stuff, and as reports keep coming out, the prognosis gets worse and worse. So the idea is to really center on creating sustainable and people-centered economies. I also wanted to read from Scientific America, which had an article in 2018, global tourism has a bigger share of carbon emissions than thought. International tourism accounts for 8% of all carbon emissions worldwide, about 3 times more than previously thought, according to a study released yesterday. The study published in Nature estimates that global tourism, including transportation, accommodations, activities, food consumption, and all the energy and infrastructure required to accommodate visitors, produced about 4.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2013. Air travel accounts for 1/5 of these emissions. And the United States has the biggest footprint of all, about 1 billion metric tons of CO2 per year. So these are really big issues and not things that can be addressed piece by piece. So I definitely invite council to look beyond a single year and to think about also the emissions of folks that can't even live here anymore because they've been priced out and they're having to drive into the county. 40,000 workers are coming in on a peak October day. This is the TDA statistics. So that's a lot of CO2. And we also have the construction of these large buildings that are, drawing from materials, we're losing tree cover in the city. That's been well established. So it's really important to think about all of the ramifications of our addiction to tourism. And so I'm also, I want to also bring it back. I'm from a small Appalachian town. I was not born here, but I did see how an industry there, a chemical company, was able to, the Black community was made to be on a former trash dump, and it's, we need to end these extractive economies, not just tourism, but just focus on people-centered worker cooperatives and better ways forward. Thank you.
Elvia Diaz is next, and then Joe Koval.
Hello, Elvia Diaz. I just wanted to add to some of the great things said here. One, Kim Roney, your numbers with the 42-to-1 persons, keeping with statistics for this 1-year period, hoping that turns into a 2-year period of statistics, or 3-year. The amount of people moving here on a given day, whether they're housed or homeless, is an important statistic. Even if it's just a point in time statistic that we use to figure out how many people are moving here per day. But also landlord-tenant rights need to be addressed. I said it last month, I'm sorry, that in order to have people housed, we have a standard of housing that we use to have people move in with vouchers. A landlord has to have coded issues addressed in order to use a voucher. It is a reason why some people don't accept vouchers. If everyone was held to the same standard, then more vouchers would be accepted. As we look at the codes that are in existence, they need to be updated. And I wish that they would be looked at within this year period and changed. It was said, I believe, at the housing meeting that was Thursday, last Thursday, laws are hard to change. They're not. The other things are that we do have the richest soil in the country, in the state. And I think that's another statistic that we should look at. Also, the job reentry program for the citizens here. We have, 18 new hotels, and people are hired for 89 days and fired because of their background checks, some of which are incorrect. I don't believe that you should hire someone and after 89 days fire them. I mean, that's one, irresponsible. But for a reentry into society, a person should be allowed to work in a hotel in their own city where they grew up. This is why they're lying on the bench, because they can't get jobs.
Thank you. Okay, Joe Coble and then Kat Hugh. No? Okay. I'm not saying it right. That's what you're saying. You're going to tell me. Okay.
I haven't seen you guys in a long time, but I'm back. And I'm scared. I really am. I'm 79 years old. I go to Gold's Gym every day because I'm living to be 100. That's been my goal. But I'm really afraid now, and I'm depressed. I stopped working in January, the first time since I was 13 years old, and working out. Trying to live on Social Security in Asheville? Laugh. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I have fought for white people, black people, brown people, every so-called what do you call them? We called them underdogs back in the 40s. Now I are one. And I'm scared to walk downtown even though they call me Downtown Joe, and I do more for the Chamber of Commerce as far as smiles and laughs with tourists that I engage in people that are hurting. But I'm afraid to look at them now. Why? You can imagine. Hey, I could be right there. And I feel like, because you're going to know a little bit about me anyway, aren't you? I feel like that because I was an only child and had to fight alcoholism and family and go out in the surrounding areas and find family, and have therefore been a social worker and working for everybody, developing into a complete giver and not a taker, and now I'm scared. So but I'm coming back because I've always gotten up and realized that I have to take care of myself, Joe, or nobody else will. So all the young people I know downtown that work 2 and 3 jobs and live 3 and 4 together, that are leaving, and all the older people that may or may not be able to live on Social Security, we can't do it. What do? I don't have a choice. So I'm coming back. But I ask you to think about us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kat. And then the final speaker after that is Charles Warner.
Hello. My name is Kat New.
It's an N.
I'm obviously a strong supporter of the moratorium. I just wanted to address a couple of issues regarding the timeline and the proposals around the moratorium. I am in agreement with Councilman Haynes in that the occupancy tax can hopefully be reassessed, and I would really like to see that in addition to the moratorium, there is an agenda or a proposal attached to facilitate some sort of change regarding that occupancy tax. And in doing so, hopefully allocate some of those funds to public transportation and sidewalks. Both sides of town that I've lived on, east and west, I see people walking to the bus stop every single day. I drive a car, but I have a bicycle. I'm scared to ride my bike, and I'm scared to walk on the streets because they're curvy, narrow roads, and you're gonna, if you don't walk on the opposing side, you can't see an oncoming car. I just hope that we can get some funds allocated to more sidewalks and better bus stations. People can't even, they have no protection from the sun or the rain when they're waiting for their bus, if it comes on time or comes on schedule. In addition to that, I really would like to see more standards enacting requirements for more local products to be used at the motels or hotels. That seems like something that would be a good idea in terms of, the climate agenda, climate crisis. Why can't we enact a certain percentage of the food products, the beverages, the produce and meats to be from more local, clean sources? There's tons of farmers here. There's tons of ranchers and producers that do things the right way. Is that a possibility? That's it. And I hope that with the moratorium that we can just basically enact cleaner, tougher standards and more local products and usage. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Charles Warner, and I express no opinion on whether we should or should not have a moratorium. But what the council needs to consider is, where do we want to go with Asheville? If you're tired of tourists, fine, implement a moratorium, keep it on for years. But look at all the shops and restaurants downtown. Some of them are hanging on by a thread. You cut off the tourist supply, they're going out of business. I guarantee you. That's where they get a substantial part of their money. I'm not saying we want to be nothing but tourists, but we are a tourist town. If we don't want to be a tourist town, well, fine, quit advertising, but what do you want? Do you want heavy industry here with the pollution it brings? And the interstates here, they can't handle the traffic they've got now. I don't think we want to go that way. Tourists come, they spend money, they leave. To me, that sounds like a pretty good deal. A hotel takes up a lot less footprint than a house, and it generates more money than a house. So we need to decide where we're going to go and what Asheville is. Then we can decide how to plan from there. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, that is all that I had signed up to speak on this. Okay, hold on. Let me just talk to council because we are scheduled for a break.
Let's finish this.
Okay, we're closing the public hearing on this item.
No, that wasn't what I meant. I was like, let's finish this issue before we take a break. Let's get to a vote on this issue before we take a break.
Okay. I have one person who wants to speak on this item, 2 and 3, and that is it. Okay? All right. Yes, and then yes, and then yes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Van Vogel, and I'm president of Homeward Bound of Western North Carolina. I was not prepared and intending to speak on this issue, but as I listened to every issue that's been discussed in Council today, there's an overriding theme of how it impacts affordable housing. I start from the proposition that almost any restriction on development has an impact, sometimes unintended, on the building of affordable housing, which I believe is the most critical need in Asheville. So we started this evening with a discussion of the Broadway project. I have no opinion on that. It sounds like there's some problems with the market and with access. But Mr. Allen presented a very compelling proposal for significant affordable housing as part of that project. I would hate to see this moratorium preclude such proposals over the next year and perhaps continuing, because moratoriums have a way of dragging out or at least discouraging development proposals while the moratorium is in place. So if it's possible to consider an exemption from the moratorium for projects that promote affordable housing, I suggest that you consider that. So I would suggest two exemptions. One is for proposals that do have affordable housing components. Secondly, later on tonight, you are going to adopt a fantastic policy on how to dispose of city-owned property for affordable housing projects, or that would include affordable housing projects. I could well envision a developer with a proposal for Lee Walker Heights property, which is several acres, of a hotel and 80 units of affordable housing paid for by the developer. I would hate to see that development proposal precluded, discouraged, or delayed by this moratorium. Affordable housing is our most critical need. We can't let this moratorium on hotels, which, as I read it, is really geared toward standalone hotels in the central business district. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and let's consider exemptions to the moratorium that will promote additional public housing in Asheville. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Michael Stratton. I'm on the city's multimodal commission, but I'd just like to explain that I'm talking on my own accord tonight, not expressing the views of that commission. I want to say thank you, number one, for being bold. I think I'd come up here in the past and asked you to do so, be bold. I know that the hotel industry, it can be a kingmaker, and it can also be somebody that pervades the boogeyman argument like we saw tonight. You know, if you say no, we're going to be forever blackballed again, which I'm going to push back on that and say that we live in one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And for that reason, you know, the highest and best use for the downtown corridor, at least the highest anyway, economically, it was always going to be for the hotel footprint. So as long as we allow the hotels to be the highest bidder, the seller will always inevitably sell to that developer. And I think it's important to remember that every time we do that, we're hollowing ourselves out a little bit. We're taking a little piece of our core, a little piece of our heart, and we're giving it away for a short-term gain. And that's, you know, I'd like to think that's a bit of an extractive way of doing things. Back in the 1880s, we did the same thing with our forest around here. And today you go to Joyce Cumberland National Forest, and that's one of the most sad places that I've ever been to, because you look at these massive trees and you think, wow, that used to be everywhere. That used to be the way it was. And now you look at it and say it's just a shell of itself. And every time we do that here in the downtown corridor, where we preclude local business, let's say office space or even dense housing to go because we've given it to hotel space, we're doing the same thing. I really appreciate you guys taking a step back and allowing us to think about that. Because eventually, if we keep doing that, what's going to be left? Thank you.
Hello, Council and Mayor. I'm Ashley Cooper. Thank you so much for hosting tonight's meeting in this room and for allowing a few extra comments. If I'm understanding correctly, the materials about this moratorium, it says that that you'll be contracting with the Urban Land Institute of Charlotte District Council to analyze the hotel industry, and I imagine that's analyzing the impact in tourism. And so I just really want to ask that you approach, like others have said, approach this from a comprehensive perspective, because that doesn't sound, analyzing the hotel industry doesn't sound like it's looking at the entire land use opportunity. And it says in the pros that you're going to research best practices to enhance the city's land use policies, tools, and strategies. But I see a discrepancy between what the actual proposal might be and then what you're saying the outcome will be from it. And I hope that it also says that you'll be giving clear direction about hotel development, and I hope that you're expanding that to include clear direction about land use as a more general sense, clear direction around what sort of affordable housing criteria might go along with hotels, other things that kind of go to this broader issue. And then I also want to name that, unfortunately, every one of you know how many plans and research studies have happened in this city that have sat on shelves and not been turned into anything. Our 10-year homelessness plan. And so while there's value in the research, there's some things that you already know. So I also want to encourage, take this year to do some little strategic pilots to see what happens if you put this sort of criteria under this sort of circumstance, maybe not specifically around hotels, but that get to some of the larger issues, like what could be piloted from the information that we already know, so that then when you open it back up to big developers, you've already learned some things that aren't just data from the research. And then I also just want to, echo about the importance of anything that can be done about the occupancy tax and the over-marketing of our town and what it is that we're marketing and how we can refunnel some of that funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to close the public hearing. Do I have questions, comments, or a motion on this? Comments, please.
Thank you all for weathering the storm tonight. It's not too late compared to some of our meetings.
We're not done.
We're not done. But I do want to say thank you for everybody who's come out and spoke their piece, and we've got some very passionate, bright individuals who have said many different things, from the economics of hotels to the impacts and infrastructure and housing and all sorts of things. And we were here a couple of weeks ago in this same room doing a workshop for affordable housing. And what I heard tonight and what I've heard kind of throughout this whole hotel thing has been a common theme of the intersection between hotels, displacement, and housing. And then all that kind of wraps around with the quality of life of people who are having these growing pains of how hotels affect our quality of life here. And with this moratorium, this council is challenged to move forward in a very strategic and purposeful way of developing policy. I don't think anybody is expecting us to come out of this thing saying, well, got nothing for you. I think we are definitely expected to come out of this thing with some sound policy that includes some answers to some of those questions of the impacts, the infrastructure, and one of the main themes, the intersection of hotels and housing. And moving forward, I am going to add my voice to the conversation, as well as other council members, I presume. But my specific contribution to the conversation is going to be on something that Derek Allen said a little bit earlier. He talked about his project, the project that he was representing, building affordable housing, and that contribution to our community. Now, I don't think a drop in the bucket of a couple of units is going to do anything, but I think it's worth exploring on how that all fits together. And I think we have the obligation to everybody in this room and people who are not in this room to explore everything across the board on how we attack this situation. We've dealt with it for quite a while, and people have been, some people are for hotels, some people don't want any more hotels ever again. Say amen. But I think we owe it to everybody to come out of this with very sound policy and to address all the concerns that you've had in some sort of way that makes policy that is going to be beneficial to the city of Asheville moving forward. People aren't always going to want to build hotels here. I don't think that's going to be the case. But while they want to build hotels here, again, assess the impact, talk about the money from the TDA, talk about the infrastructure, and mainly talk about housing and how we can implement that in a more meaningful way. So going forward, we owe it to you. We're going to roll up our sleeves and do what we need to do to make good, meaningful policy. And I'm definitely sure that you will hold our feet to the fire if we are not addressing everything across the board. I want to look at everything and come out of this with something. And, I don't expect to come out of this at the end of it saying, hey, got nothing for you. So that's not going to be an option for me.
Any other comments or a motion on this item?
Comment. Yeah, I totally agree with Councilman Young. Failure is not an option on this effort. And if we know our city manager, and I think we do, even though she's still relatively new, she will not let us fail on this. I do also.
No pressure.
Yeah, no, sorry. I do want to remind people about a couple things, though. It's not. This is going to be a question that we'll need to get into about sort of the legal scope of things that we can explore during this moratorium. So there's both what we can do legally under the auspices of this moratorium, and then also what we can do within the time frame of the moratorium. So we have a year. One of the things we've heard a lot is people wanting us to explore the occupancy tax and how that can be different. Again, I don't know if it would be even legal for us to sort of look at that under this moratorium, or if we have time to do that. But what I want to remind people of is that there is a process happening this very moment that is about that. The TDA has a planning process happening right now for their tourism management and investment plan. And they've already had several rounds of public input. There will be more. The hoped for outcome of that process is that there will be a list of local government projects and other opportunities to use the occupancy tax money to invest in our community in a way that is broader than happens now. So I just encourage you to pay attention to that process, get on their email list, go to the meetings, be a voice in that process for shifting that, for shifting or changing whatever ends up the outcome of that. I don't think it would be possible, certainly with the current legislature, for the city to unilaterally secure a change to that. So from my standpoint, this is an opportunity for the city and the TDA to find a way to cooperate so that more of those occupancy tax dollars come to the city to meet the needs of our residents in a way that everybody has expressed tonight and that we just know happens. So that is the process that is happening now. You can go to AshevilleCVB.com/TMIP, get on the list, and please participate in that process. The last thing I want to say is I think if someone sort of flew in here, if they'd never been to Asheville, if they didn't know anything about us, I'm afraid that they would come out of this meeting thinking that we don't care about affordable housing and we're not doing anything on affordable housing and that we're not doing anything around climate change. And I just want to remind us that on affordable housing, we have more tools in our toolbox than any city in North Carolina. Any city in North Carolina. We are doing a lot on affordable housing, and we are doing more. We are going to adopt a policy later tonight. There will be a community land trust coming on board. There will be a fee rebate policy coming board. Our affordable housing staff continues to build that toolbox of tools that will incentivize and make it better, make it easier for us to build affordable housing here. So we are doing a lot. Do we need to do more? Always, but we are. Same thing I would say on climate change. Asheville has been working on this issue with our first set of climate goals since 2007, 12 years ago, and we have upped the game twice since then, including the resolution on renewable energy. And I will say that resolution doesn't just commit us to reaching the goals on our own municipal operations. That resolution also commits us to supporting and working with the county to reach the larger community goal. So we have committed ourselves to that. And last council meeting, we approved an RFP to explore the new Green Source Advantage program. We just approved an RFP to explore putting solar on municipal and local government rooftops. These are the first two steps that we would do anyway. So again, we are doing a lot. I realize people want this all to move faster. Would we all love for it to move faster? Yes, but it is moving. And again, I would say that we are doing more around climate change than any city in North Carolina right now. So I just don't want people to forget in the earnestness of wanting to do more and wanting to push us, which you should always do. I'm not saying don't push us, continue to push, but we cannot forget where we are, which in many ways is actually pretty good when compared with our peer cities. So with that, I am also happy to make a motion on the moratorium, unless there are more comments.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I move to adopt an ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on hotel development approvals within the city of Asheville, including hotel extended stay, hotel large, and hotel small, as defined in section 7-2-5 of the city's Unified Development Ordinance, commencing September 24th, 2019, and expiring no later than September 24th, 2020.
Second.
Okay. Anybody else wishing to comment on this item? No? Okay. I'll make a comment. This is exciting. I think it's our first moratorium, and they are, a hazard to be taken on carefully. I mean, from a legal standpoint, because we're veering into a territory that even the U.S. Supreme Court has already weighed in on how we have to handle these. So I know there are some people who are frustrated with the timing, but that is not a haphazard choice to try to have up to a year on this, because we do want it to be able to survive a challenge if someone were to challenge this moratorium, and do it in a way that we think is going to be able to, we can sustain throughout the course of up to a year. And I guess my only concern about this process is that we set some sort of expectation that this city and a city council can fix all things. And I think, most people know that we can't. We are sort of the front line for so many issues in a community, whether it's technically within our jurisdiction, authority-wise or not. And I think I've decided that that's absolutely fine. And so I would I'm looking forward to this process. I think it will be interesting and innovative, and maybe we can set a precedent for other communities that are having similar experiences to ours. We do have sort of sister cities across the nation that are having a similar combination of growth in tourism and an affordable housing crisis, like Portland, Maine, or Duluth, Minnesota, or Boulder, Colorado, or Portland, Oregon, or Austin, Texas. We have a lot of other places that are having the same challenges as us. So I'm supportive of the motion tonight. And with that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're going to take a 15-minute break. It is. We're going to take a 15-minute break.
Their specific district, while still having a say in electing more than half the members of the council. And what would be wrong with that? Thanks for listening.
Okay, Lawrence Waller. And then next is Tom Foran. Did Tom leave? Okay. The next will be Jonathan. I think it says Jonathan Wainscott. Thanks.
Hi. I don't know a whole lot about this issue as I just moved home, but I want to echo that point. I think that the idea of a compromise between the two systems of election seems like the best option. So I think I would support Councilmember Kapoor's idea about that compromise. I have read that the state legislature also has the authority to change the Asheville city charter. So it seems like if you go about changing the charter, they can just change the charter back, and then you open sort of a bidding war of the the two organizations competing with each other. Whereas if you present a compromise option that would perhaps be acceptable to all sides, then that might be best. And I also think that it is good to have one person who represents your neighborhood as opposed to having one person who's maybe from one neighborhood but represents another. I think it's one of the oldest principles of Republican government that you're supposed to live in the area that you're representing. And I know that that's different when it's just one city, but I feel like somebody from North Asheville might not have the same priorities as somebody from South Asheville. So thank you.
On deck is Patrick Parker.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Wainscott. I've said several times that I disagree with having the at-large system in general. It's not fair. The new system spreads representation all over town. We had an issue earlier tonight with a neighborhood kind of like going, "Hey, did the guy talk to us?" And that was your district, right? You know, that was Shiloh. Isn't that in the South Asheville? How that breaks down anyway. So I mean, being able to go to your individual district is representative is exactly what we need to be able to do. There's been we haven't had any kind of like community engagement around this issue the way we have with the budget, the hiring of the manager, the hiring of the police chief, and all that kind of stuff. We had a referendum that kind of came out of nowhere. It was designed to kind of shore up a defense in for a lawsuit that we're not going to pursue at this point. It's just all been cynical. I mean, well, the one thing that is consistent is that it's been cities councils' desire to hang on to the system that put it in place in the first place. And I appreciate the data dive that you did, Mr. Kapoor. Came about a year late. I mean, it wasn't difficult to figure out how this affected the African American vote. It's still not difficult to figure that out. It strengthens the African American vote. It does strengthen the Republican vote. Basically, South Asheville goes to having a 20% Republican share of that district. At large, it's 13%. So basically, you're talking about 1/5 of the districts having 1/5 of the vote being Republican in an election where 1/5 of the people turn out. That's the big Republican takeover of town. It's ridiculous. And I appreciate trying to do something that makes it seem like it was Asheville's way, but I don't think that 9 people on city council is going to do us any more good. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. I would prefer to have less and have more power per person. I don't think that it helps hold everybody to accountable, because now you can say, oh yeah, Mr. John Q. Public, don't forget it takes a majority of 5 on council, where now it was a majority of 4. And I don't think that, just placating Asheville's pride because we don't like what you did to us. When what was done to us needed to be done. It just needed to. It was time to grow. It's been time to grow. And it's just unfortunate this has become such a distraction. Thank you for calling the media out for not covering this very well. It's been completely one-sided. If we're concerned about, racial makeup in the police department only being 9%, look at our press in this town. The Asheville Citizen Times has no African Americans, and neither does WCQS, and neither does, the Mountain Express. So,
Patrick Berger, and then Karen Ramshaw will be next.
I'm Patrick Berger, lifelong resident. This really is a personal issue because, once again, the North Carolina General Assembly that was illegally elected by racially gerrymandered districts, illegally partisan gerrymandered districts, decided to tell our city how to run our districts, that they wanted to district them. I don't necessarily have an opinion on districts. I think that I appreciate a lot of what these other folks have mentioned, that I think it could be more representative. That's not what we're talking about here. Right now, we're talking about a undemocratically elected General Assembly trying to hoist their agenda on our city, on our citizenry, and to me, that's unacceptable. We saw what happened with the control of the water district. We fought that tooth and nail, and we won. And I think that was absolutely right for that, and I think it's right for this system too. I want to know what y'all have been doing for the last year. We had a referendum to say, we don't want these districts. The majority of people in this city said, we don't want these districts. What have you been doing for the last year? Could I have my time paused? I'd like an actual answer. No? No comment? Okay. So we have before us a proposal to go back to at-large elections. I think that is, I am for that because that is what the city of Asheville, our residents said we wanted. So tonight, I hope that y'all decide to do that. I have been incredibly disappointed and shocked by the lack of leadership on this council about this issue. Not to mention the climate change, I think, we're getting there. But I'll just leave with some more words from Greta. We're watching you. Thank you.
I'm Karen Ramshaw with Public Interest Projects. And I don't like being told what to do by our North Carolina legislature any more than you do. But I too want to speak for consideration of the proposal by Vijay Kapoor, a combination of 5 districts and 4 at-large seats. We talk a lot in this community about representation, and I feel there's a place for a more local focus on council. Mr. Kapoor won a seat on council by a huge margin, and I believe much of his support came from an area of our city that felt its needs were ignored. My father died 18 months ago, and we moved my mom to an apartment in South Asheville. I go see my mom 3 times a week. One reason you don't hear more from people in South Asheville is because it would take them an hour to get here. They need a voice at the table, and so do other areas of our city. Here are the directions to my house. Take the River Road heading north as you leave downtown. You'll pass the old prison, then pass the sewage treatment plant, then you pass the old landfill, then you'll pass the new prison. If you get to the new landfill, you've gone too far. So let's be honest, some areas of our community get less consideration than others. I believe that was raised earlier tonight as well. Mr. Kapoor's plan would give us both the local and global voices. The new plan might also give us the opportunity for people to vote for someone to represent them, and then feel freer to vote for at-large candidates that represent more comprehensive values like our environment, our education, equity, etc. Thank you.
Nina Tovish, and then next is Matilda Bliss.
Good evening, my name is Nina Tovish, and I am most concerned that in the process of going back to our district at large, that we maintain the PIC 3 structure that we had before. My understanding is that's included in the new reversion of the ordinance. That is key. That PIC 3 process, unfortunately, it's not ranked choice voting. You can't have everything, but it gets us much closer to actual true representation. The notion that representation needs to be primarily geographic, and that districts, whether it's 5 districts or 5 districts plus 4, what's most important is that the electorate has a chance to choose a group of people that they feel represent their interests. And our PIC 3 system is actually really good at doing that. And the current sitting members of council are proof of that. The fact that Mr. Kapoor was elected with such a large number of votes from all over the city shows he got his support from South Asheville, but it was not only from South Asheville. Similarly, our esteemed members, Mr. Young and Ms. Smith, also demonstrate the power of the PIC 3 proposition. That system, which I have lived in a number of other places I've never encountered anywhere else, is actually very progressive and very constructive for our city. And it's important that it be maintained both at the primary level and in the general election. So I hope that that will be maintained as a signature quality of our elections as we go forward. I think it allows for a better form of representation than geographic districts. Thank you.
Matilda Bliss. And then next is Joe Coble.
Thank you. I spoke to council in January about this, so I definitely wanted to be here when y'all approve. Well, it won't be technically tonight, but it sounds like it's finally going to be, the charter's going to be changed. I appreciate that. I avoided the bus that would have got me where I'm staying right now to make sure I could stay and keep conversing with y'all. These things are important. Looking at this current district system, we have the black vote, which has already been decreased over several decades due to racist due to gentrification, the other G word, and other policies that have been very much supported by the city. That has decreased the black vote, and then these districts will further decrease the power of the black vote. And of course, this comes at a time where we have our 2 black council members, and the electorate is swinging left. So definitely want to acknowledge that this is not some kind of like, we want to be fair to everybody type of move by the state. Of course, it was mentioned that the state legislature hasn't even been elected fairly. So yeah, I'm glad that finally folks are moving forward. It's pretty late. But I think it's super important to acknowledge some of these dynamics, and things like transit, which like disproportionately benefits black communities, is something that we are moving forward to support in this city. There's a lot more work to be done, and we need to make sure everybody has a voice in those things.
Joe Coble, did Joe leave? Okay, Charles Warner. Okay, and then Carol, I have you last. Oh, nope, not last, but second to last.
Thanks. Carol Rogoff-Hallstrom. I spoke at some length and in some detail when you had your work session here on July 2nd. I will not repeat all of that, but simply express my appreciation that you are moving forward on the 2 ordinances that will amend city charter as one of the options that our city attorney laid out that evening. I'm appreciative for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Soren Peterson. Sorry, I should have warned you were on deck.
Soren Pedersen.
Sorry.
It's fine. So I have to admit that, as with some of the other people who are here today, I drift in and out of following local politics as closely as I should. And I hope this is one of those instances where I come back in and pay more attention. But the last time that I was paying attention was when Raleigh had taken the stand to force Asheville to have districts. And part of the reason that I voted against Raleigh having that hand in creating districts, voting for the resolution that the county was, or the council was for, was that I didn't want Raleigh to see that as an opportunity to further push its agenda on the city as it had with previous issues. And while I don't, again, as I'm coming in with less information than perhaps I should, I don't have a specific stand. I think it should be Asheville's decision in this case. I think that when I'm thinking back to the legislature, their issue was not, as I understood it, districts per se, but the fact that it was the district or the people elected were not representative of the entire body. And I would say, and perhaps this is an issue more for the next thing we'll talk about, the primaries, but I would say that perhaps looking at another method of voting, requesting that the city be allowed to either look at, as Nina Tonish suggested, at ranked balloting or at some other method might be a way to address not only specific areas of Asheville, but also specific communities that may be spread across the entire city, but not concentrated in terms of representation. So again, I being cynical, I saw Raleigh's push as having deeper meaning, but I would suggest that perhaps, as others have suggested, the idea of representation is coming from a better place than the legislature's views on other issues suggest.
Thank you. Okay, so that's who I have signed up to speak on this item, and there's a sign-up sheet for the next one. So these are separate, and we're not voting on this one, but we're going to roll right into. I know, but we're going to roll it. Look, I'm going to put the sign-up sheet over here.
Whatever we do with the districts, or it's done to us with the districts, depending on how everything turns out, I don't see how we can have a fair election if we have no primary. And so I know when I circled that I was for primaries, and I am for primaries, I just hope it was written in there so that whatever happens with the districts doesn't nullify whatever the primary. My concern about the districts is that we don't know what Raleigh will do if the ordinance passed to go back to the other one. And if it goes to court or whatever might happen there, my biggest concern is that if we say we still want a primary, that nothing happens to that. And if they decide to push back and say, okay, now we want a partisan election or any of that it doesn't affect the primary. So that's my biggest concern I have. Thank you.
And after Jonathan Wainscott is Nina Tovish.
Hey. So yeah, I think that not having a primary is a totally goofy thing, and if we'd been acting on this right away when this came down, we would have had more time to deal with it. Apparently, this is something that affects nonpartisan elections in even years because that wasn't statutory created for that situation. And so it wasn't so much that they took Asheville's primary away from this. This is something that doesn't exist anywhere in the state, and I believe Mr. Brown said that would make us unique in that situation, so we could show the legislature that we're doing something all by ourselves. It doesn't apply to the rest of the state. I don't know how they're going to feel about that. I've been down to the Board of Elections, and I can tell that you're all amped to clarify this. I see that you're all excited to drop the news on what's going on with this, because the Board of Elections has been trying to figure out what they're going to do, because if we try to put the primary in place, then we're going to have the primary happening 2 days after early voting. And I know that you'll be able to explain all of this, which is very confusing. I can't wait to find out what the info is. And thank you for all the excellent work that you've been doing too, by the way. Thank you.
We'll take a moment to have some information about this.
Briefly to address that, it is important to say that there's a big difference between having a municipal primary in an even year election and an odd year election. The state statutes are written such that there's a very clear path provided for those having elections in odd years, where we previously were. In even years, there simply is no statutory path to arrive at that point. And because of the way election deadlines are set up for early voting and absentee ballots, there actually is a date impossibility to have a primary in even-numbered years on the same schedule as odd-numbered years, which is normally in either September and October. So it is simply not an option. It's not something that state boards of election or local boards of election can do. So the way that the amendment is structured is it allows us to reinstate the primary, but to follow the county system. The county system, along with the general election, will have the primary in March. So it does happen. It happens a few months earlier, but it is the one path forward to allow for primaries in the even years.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, Nina Tobish.
You told her she was on there.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Nina Tovish. So my chief concern about, I'm all in favor of primaries. Gotta have them. Would be crazy not to have them. My big concern is about the timing. And I'm looking forward to hearing from our Board of Elections representative here today about any flexibility that there may be in the question of timing. I understand the appeal logistically and legally for a March primary, but I would like to argue that for a municipal election, it's actually really a disaster. That means that folks who are interested in running for city council need to file in December. That's a very short time frame away. And then they will have an extremely long election season, 9 months of running for office for a city election. That's a really big challenge for a lot of potential candidates. It obviously favors people who have existing name recognition and existing infrastructure, and I think that's really problematic in the way that it shuts people out. If there is any way that the County Board of Elections can allow us to have our municipal elections in July or early August to allow for absentee ballot distribution and the timing around that, I think that would be a much preferable alternative. Not a lawyer, can't speak to the legalities. I hope that wiser heads will be able to offer some guidance on that. Thank you.
Matilda Bliss, and then I have Elvia Diaz.
Thanks. I had spoke in January, and several other people spoke either in January or February about this issue. If we had addressed this sooner, we wouldn't have to have this conversation about having a primary 9 months before the 9 months before the actual election. So that's something that, I feel like we've all lost on. I think that a lot of these steps could have been taken way sooner. So it's great to have a primary again. And I really hope that, some options as far as having a later one can be explored, and it can be explored thoroughly. And also that if the State Board of Election tries to say it has to be partisan, that the city stands firm and says that these are still nonpartisan elections. Thanks.
Elvia. And then on deck is Soren Petters.
Elvia Diaz. Just, I guess, reiterating most of what has already been said. The time frame is just really short. It kind of does allow for people with history. It gives them an advantage over people without history of running campaigns. And also with how we proceed with, I guess in this defiance situation, to stand firm. Yeah, just standing firm with nonpartisanship.
And Jake, you're next.
Soren again. I think everyone here knows a lot of the benefits of a primary. I have perhaps an unhealthy obsession with following numbers, especially when it comes to primary campaigns and general elections. And I am reminded of this, in this discussion, of something that came from 2018, which was in West Virginia, there was a primary election. No other elections, but there was a primary election which had the winning candidate get 24% of the vote, go on to become the Republican nominee in an overwhelming Republican district, and wipe out the Democratic competition while only receiving like a fifth or a sixth of the total population's vote. And while that same issue is not so much the case in nonpartisan races, it's still the case that without a primary, you end up having factional candidates who consolidate 16 or 17% of the vote, and with that 16 or 17% are able to win a position on the council even though they weren't actually supported by a majority. And to go back to something I said before, the better solution would be to look into alternative forms of voting, such as a ranked choice vote or Condorcet method or whatever that ends up being. But I would say that that is a positive for the having primaries. Something that I've heard in the past about possible negatives has been both cost and turnout. So if we have a primary 2 or 3 months before the general election, it means that people will probably not show up if there's not a lot else on the ballot. Or if we have a separate primary, then it will add extra cost to that. And that's always a balance. I don't mean to come and speak on like which is more important, getting more people or having more time for people to come out. But I would say that to me, as someone who likes voting and likes following it, is something I'd like the council to think about when we go towards that. And as one other point, I know it's been said before that the state has overwhelming control over what the city does. And there is a possibility, of course, that whatever is passed by the council is struck down by the state. It would be nice to have something in place that they haven't addressed, to say, even if they strike down a primary, to have something in place like an alternative method, like something along those lines. And again, I apologize for not doing the research beforehand, but I appreciate at least having the time to say or give peace of mind.
Thank you. Jake. Speaking of the Board of Elections.
Speaking of the Board of Elections, Mayor, Council, my name is Jake Quinn. I stand before you as the chair of the Buncombe County Board of Elections. And here is the latest on this issue. I'm reading verbatim from an email that the Interim General Counsel of the State Board transmitted to our city attorney. And it says, the State Board has not taken a position on the issue of a March primary in Asheville. To the extent there is litigation risk with the solution you propose, it may be advisable for you to communicate with the County Board of Elections and the county attorney to apprise them of the situation should the City Council determine to make the change you propose to their charter. In other words, the State Board has punted to the Buncombe Board on whether or not we can do a March primary. I did not expect to have such decision-making authority when I assumed to that position, but there you have it. With respect to our ability to handle a March primary, municipal primary for Asheville, not a problem. We have a very big primary already scheduled. We're already training people to make sure that that primary goes smoothly. As has been pointed out by some folks here today, you've got to register in December to run in March.
For all offices.
For all offices, yeah. Except for school board, soil and water. You register for those in July.
Because there's no primary.
There's no primary. So operationally, we can handle it. Operationally, it would be a challenge to handle another primary after March. And as Mr. Pedersen observed, there would be a cost involved. And I believe there are 37 precincts that vote in the Asheville civic elections. That's no small tab to open up those 37 precincts for a primary. So that's just an FYI. What we did at the Buncombe Board is we sent this question to the Buncombe County Attorney.
Just keep kicking it.
I worked in government long enough to know to get a legal opinion before making a decision. And we'll see what Mr. Frew and company say. But it could well be that in the future, the Buncombe County Board of Elections has a hearing on this issue. But right now, we have no definitive guidance from Raleigh, and it looks as if you can proceed with your proposal, and should it be relevant, we will take it up at the Buncombe Board at the appropriate time. If anyone has any questions about any of this, I would be happy to do my best to try to answer them. I will defer to the mayor.
Does anyone have a question? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that is the last. That's the last speaker I have on this issue. Now, remember, we're not voting on this tonight, so everyone can marinate on it some more because it will be on our next agenda. Yes.
And point of order, Mayor, if you will, it's a good idea to remind everyone that there will not be an additional public hearing at that meeting for this issue.
Yes, right. We will not be taking additional public comment. It will just be the vote. 22nd is the next city council meeting. The next second Tuesday falls on Yom Kippur, so we're not having a city council meeting on that day. We're having a second session in October. And some other folks on council may want to speak to this. I feel like I've had to bite my tongue on the timing issue forever because quite obviously one of the issues here is that the legislature went into session in January and they only now are finally sort of going home. And for us to take action on this issue while they're in session would be somewhat ridiculous because they would just probably turn around and undo what we did. So we're hoping that look, this ain't our first rodeo, folks. We have been doing battle with the legislature over various items for a long time. This is chess, not checkers. So please know that this isn't just something we've been ignoring. This is, this requires careful planning, and I'm still not giving away all the cards because it's not going to be over. If the legislature decides to come back into session between now and when it's time to file, I don't know what exactly we'll do. So I'm sorry if some of you are frustrated by the timing, but please know there was some thought put into that. And here we are, and there's still no absolute guarantee, but maybe with the new maps being drawn, I don't believe Senator Edwards, who's been the supporter of this legislation, will have any part of the city in his district any longer, although we know that also has not been an impediment for coming after Asheville by the legislature. In fact, the person who removed our primary was a representative from a suburb in Charlotte, so, who lost his election to the former Governor Hunt's daughter. I want to say that I don't take lightly taking on Raleigh because we have seen very real consequences of engaging in that kind of warfare. So I appreciate that folks want to push us and they are ready to shove us out front and to do battle on this. But for those of us who actually go down there and walk the halls and look at the climate we're dealing with, this is serious, and I think it's an important enough issue that we undo what they did again. And I think that we asked the voters to vote on this issue so we could have support from the citizens in this movement forward we're trying to work on here. and you did that. You did it. We also did a referendum on the water issue when the water system was taken. So we have, there is a method to the madness here, and we have been somewhat successful, but we have lost some things. We've lost some critical things. We've lost, for example, the ability to annex subdivisions that are built on the outskirts of the city that tap into our water system. We're the only city in North Carolina that can't do that, which means that you're looking confused because that is retribution for who we are in our position vis-a-vis Raleigh. So, there's going to be a chink, there's going to be a cut, there's going to be a repercussion. So you have to decide carefully what you're willing to take on. And we are fighters, and we have been fighters, and anyone who doubts that is not paying close attention. But I think this one is worth it, and I'm hopeful we'll come out on top, but there may be some more bumps in the road before we get there. That's all I have to say for tonight. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to say a few things. First off, I appreciate those of you who are still here. It's 9:03 on a Tuesday, so thank you all for sitting through this. I wanted to talk about two things that I've sort of observed throughout this process that I've kind of learned about Asheville that have really been sort of laid bare for me through this, and from the referendum all the way down to where we are tonight. And they're not really positive things, and I'm sorry to sound this way, but I think it's important for me to express here. And with all due respect, I've been listening to a lot of things since 5 o'clock, and there's a few things I wanted to say. The first is it showed me about Asheville about how we react emotionally to things. Like you all, I did not like Raleigh telling us what to do. I was angry. I voted against the referendum. I campaigned against the referendum. I like to stick myself out there as the poster child, for folks who wanted to be angry about what Raleigh did to us. And what I realized I didn't do that I should have done, that I'm trying to do now, is understand that we have the ability to make this change on council. What the General Assembly has done, and maybe not in a way that we would like to, but it's actually given us an opportunity to ask ourselves, what kind of representation do we want in the city of Asheville? We have that ability right now. We can change our charter sort of within what the statutes allow us to do. But we haven't done that in this process here. I've heard the word fight tonight, and I've asked the question here: what system best serves the average Asheville resident? And I don't think we've answered that question. We have not, as Mr. Wainscott pointed out, we haven't done community engagement on this. And with all due respect, Mayor, I don't think this was some sort of four-dimensional chess. We just didn't do it. I think we tried to avoid this and shirk it. I mean, I'll be straight with you. That's what I think we did for having been on this council. This wasn't strategic to be here right now. We didn't do it. And I've been trying to think about other ways that we could possibly do it, and I've laid some of those out, and I don't want to go into those too much in great detail. Ms. Tovish was talking about a Pick 3 system and I agree with you. I think the Pick 3 is great, and that's under what I was throwing out there. We would maintain the Pick 3 system because I do think there are benefits to that. So in addition to this sort of, I think, reaction and not really asking the question, like, what really is best for us, we're missing an opportunity here. And even tonight, with all due respect, I haven't heard articulated why we think that returning to an at-large district is good for Asheville, or an at-large system is good for Asheville. I truly haven't heard it, and I hope we do hear from council members at the next meeting. The second area that was laid bare for me is this is sort of a sensitive one, and I realize I'm treading on some sensitive areas, but I think it's important. I'm going to read a quote from someone who had spoken at public comment on August 27th here. The quote was this: "I was really uncomfortable with lots of white people talking about what was appropriate for communities of color. I think if those communities felt like districting our elections was right for them, they would have shown up and said so. And so I was really uncomfortable with people who were not part of these communities speaking for them and feeling like it was their right to do so. That was a white woman speaking who had spoken several times. In public comment, since we've been looking at this issue, there have been 2 folks from the African American community who have spoken on this issue. We are a city that takes equity and inclusion to be a serious thing. We have an equity inclusion office. We've had them look at our noise ordinance. We're having them look at our policies for implementing affordable housing on city-owned land. On an issue as important as districting, as how we choose our representatives, we did not have the Office of Equity and Inclusion look at this issue. We have a racial equity toolkit. We didn't do it. We didn't engage. We didn't have community engagement in the African American community. I will include myself in this. I didn't ask for it, and when I put out some of my proposals, I didn't consult the African American community either. And I'll be very honest with that. I've had a chance to talk with some folks over the past couple of weeks, and ask them kind of what some of the African American community, and ask them kind of what their perspectives were. And they were across the board. I mean, some folks wanted to fight, right? Some folks really felt this was Raleigh kind of coming in and trying to figure out a way of gerrymandering Asheville. Others were less so. Others liked the idea of being able to have a representative. And I realize, again, we have, and the reason I bring this up as well is, the issue of race and voice, and race, particularly in this issue, came up so many times, particularly for those who came in public comment and say they wanted to fight. But we didn't engage the African American community as an important issue as this, and we still have the opportunity to do so. And again, I don't know where, I'm not sure where it will end up. But I was amazed to see and amazed to realize that if you stay quiet in Asheville, if you don't speak for yourself, there are plenty of folks in this city who will be happy to speak for you, whether or not you give them permission. And again, I realize we have 2 members of council who are African American, but I don't think that should stop us from trying to engage the community, which sure as heck wouldn't stop us on other issues to do so. And I say to this as an Indian American, I hope you all, with the press or otherwise, if for some reason you wanted to get the Indian community's view on things, you wouldn't just ask me. I wouldn't pretend to speak for them. So this was just something that I observed on this. I still think there's time to do some good engagement process, to understand from the entire community what they think is important for them, how they think they may be impacted, and actually look at that in a real way. Because to this point, we haven't done it. And for us to say, look, we're just looking to fight, and we're just looking to make a point, to me, is not the way we ought to be governing. So I appreciate you all indulging me in that. But yeah, to me tonight, I get the desire to send a message to Raleigh. I get the desire to do that. But I think we're missing a great opportunity in Asheville, and I don't think we're living up to our true progressive potential in this city.
Okay, again, we're not voting on this tonight, but is there anyone else who wants to comment before we move on to the next topic?
I would just have one comment. So these are all incredibly important and valid questions. And even though he didn't mention it, Councilman Kapoor is well on record with some other suggestions around how we might structure our elections and such going forward. And, these are sort of fundamental questions about our democracy, and that's it's extraordinarily important. And I'm always in favor of, having a conversation about how we can do things better. But I think, where I am tonight is we need to be responsive to our voters who have said that they want us to undo and restore really what Raleigh took away from us. And I think our ability to have a different conversation about some of these other options will be difficult until we do that very clearly. The one thing I would like to just put out for conversation, and not for conversation tonight, but maybe at a governance meeting or something going forward, is the idea of how we can respond to this question that came up several times, and we've gotten a number of emails about it, and that is, how that voters like the idea of having a council person that they can sort of start with in terms of inquiries and questions and comments and complaints and things like that. And so, what I might want to just propose generally is that we consider going forward kind of assigning council members to different parts of the city for purposes of that constituent services aspect. Obviously, anybody can always email anybody on council about anything, but I think sometimes, if we all get an email, one of us we may think, oh, well, somebody else will answer that, and then it doesn't get answered, and that's unfortunate. So I think there's room there maybe to figure out how we can structure ourselves to better serve our constituents and give people a very clear entry point into the maze of city government, which is a maze if you don't know it, and just be sure that we are being as responsive as we can to our voters and our residents when they have questions and concerns. So.
I have something to say. For the sake of people's opinions on whether or not we should do this or we shouldn't do this or who we should involve, I'm going to speak from a personal standpoint right now. I'm the first black man to sit up here in 25 years. Gene Ellison was the last. I take extreme exception to the comments made by Councilmember Kapoor. Complete political puffery to manipulate who speaks and who doesn't speak for black people, white people, or whoever. Specifically, he was saying black people, and that people can manipulate that. I'll say this. The one thing that I have been for my whole entire life and can't run away from is being a black man. I was born and raised in this city. I never ever saw another black man sit up here except for Gene Ellison. Watt Daddy was here. A couple other people were here. But I will say this, as a candidate who had no chance, people gave no chance of winning, to sit in this seat, to knock on hundreds of doors till I wore out a pair of shoes, to speak with people in my community that I know and love, that they share their conversations with me, whether or not they share with anybody else on this council, because you wouldn't know. I've been here my whole life. And I do have the ability to speak for people who look like me. I've seen what's happened in this city from the time of me being a little boy to right now. And there is nobody that's going to sit up here and present political puffery to manipulate who speaks for who. Now, whether or not there's another black man that sits up here in 30 years from now, you will not manipulate what goes on. I was an advocate for our equity department. I was an advocate for our Human Relations Commission. I was an advocate for banning the box. I was an advocate for people accepting housing choice vouchers. And all of that goes back to people who look like me. So if you haven't heard from anybody that looks like me, you just ain't talking to them. And they don't want to talk to you.
Oh, that's not true. That's not true. That's disrespectful.
Okay.
That is just not true.
All right, does anyone else on council have?
I want to say something just because, I don't really want to respond to what I call foolery, but my heart is beating so bad right now. Since this has started, there has been just some undercuts made from public comment to comments from peers, and it's been centered around race. And to answer your question directly, Councilman Kapoor, they have spoken. It's called the referendum. They already spoke. And they don't want a different system. They want the at-large system that has produced consecutively 2 African-American voter candidates that they favor, period. And to change a system in this part of the game, slicing it and dicing it any way you want, could be at a detriment to our entire community. Not only Black people, but queer people, but poor people, people who are dispersed throughout this entire city and don't have concentration in one area in order to amass a vote. And for somebody to say that, oh, you can pick from 2 districts, you're likely to pull up a Black vote, that sounds like Jim Crow. You don't tell me where and when I can pick the candidates that I want to run for me and to speak for me. The system that we have in place that we're fighting for, the at-large system, is equally powerful in getting people on council as it has to keep people off council. And that's one thing we have not spoke about. The at-large system has power to keep people out. People who want to share their opinions just based on their voice and not experience and not because they've done the groundwork to get some type of idea of how people feel, like we see exemplified tonight. So to have this conversation repeatedly come up and be felt like you're made a mockery of almost because you have an opinion about a system that you know finally works for you after 30 years, don't take that lightly because you have a choice, because you have a voice to choose different. We're advocating for the at-large system because we see that it works and we have strategy to make it continue working. So for once, fall back and let us do what we know is best for our community.
Okay, we're not voting on this tonight. I just, obviously it's an emotional issue and I appreciate everyone sharing their comments tonight. I do love this council because it can have strong words with one another, but then work together very well. We spend a lot of time together and like brothers and sisters. Sometimes we're gonna have disagreements, but we're also good communicators and we will work together in the future. So I'm gonna keep remembering that. I hope we're not freaking anybody out. But
Sure. And Mayor, if I could, so I mean, to council members Young and Smith, this was not meant to be. This was not meant on my part to be disrespectful to you. I would ask, as something I think we would all agree on, is if we would be willing to have our Office of Equity Inclusion in between now and the time that this comes up to a vote, take a look at it using an equity lens.
Here's what I would offer. If you want to propose that, let's bring that up through a committee and put it on the agenda for consideration. It's not on the agenda for tonight. And it's very late and we're getting like right on top of my bedtime right now. Can we please take that up when we have some time to discuss it and think about it?
Sure.
Okay. All right. We still have another, I'm sorry, we still have another item. Two more things here. We have under new business, we have a resolution adopting a policy entitled Policies for Implementing Affordable Housing on City-Owned Land. And Nikki Reed is here to talk to us about this item.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Nikki Reed. I serve as the city's real estate program director. I'm joined by Paul D'Angelo, who's our community development director. We're here tonight to present policies for implementing affordable housing on city-owned land. At the September 6th work session, we discussed affordable housing, the realities and barriers in the development of affordable housing, as well as the city's role in affordable housing. This discussion led to some key next steps, one of which is why we're here tonight, to discuss the adoption of a policy to guide efforts to develop affordable housing on city-owned land. Another one of those key next steps was the evaluation of funding streams such as mission-driven or social equity funds as potential sources for affordable housing. We also looked at the need for the city to review zoning regulations to include a mix of housing types to support affordable housing. And then we also looked at the city's role to continue to be the voice as a convener and collaborator in this arena to bring partners together for this effort. So in terms of background regarding the city land policy, going back to 2016 is when the city identified the opportunity for using city-owned land to meet this growing need for affordable housing and for the development of mixed-income communities. Then once the bond passed, there was $15 million identified for the specific purpose of using city-owned land. And with that, we identified properties within our portfolio, including 319 Biltmore Avenue, 91 Riverside Drive, to repurpose for those uses. And so this policy is intended to establish the expectations for what we hope to achieve in the redevelopment of these sites and how we hope to solicit partners to come to the table for that effort. So the process for the policy review. So we did involve our equity team early on. That really helped us focus in on the populations that we hope to serve with this policy. We then previewed the policy with our department directors and internal staff. We then went external and spoke with the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee and got their feedback, as well as held community focus groups with area nonprofit and for-profit housing developers, as well as community stakeholders and advocates on this issue. We also had our legal division do their important review. And then the HCD committee had a review in April, and thereafter was the council's work session, and here we are today. So for your consideration, the goals that were discussed at length at the work session and now coming tonight is to develop a series of baselines that we hope to meet. Baseline number one, as you can see behind me, is that when we develop city property, is our goal to obtain at least a minimum of all units of the site, 20% being affordable to households at 60% of the area median income and accept housing choice vouchers. That's our first baseline. As a second part of that, we want that affordability period to be at least 20 years in the hopes that we can achieve 30. And then the bottom line here is that we hope to exceed that baseline. It's our preference to, when developing city property, to really exceed these baselines and or offer other community benefits that are going to help the community be successful. And that's in the policy as well. So with those baselines, we also wanted just to create some policy guidelines that really help to establish a transparent and effective process to get at those results. So one is that we decide and we determine what properties are available for redevelopment. Procedure two is that we obtain appraisals and we do due diligence as needed, which may include doing community outreach, depending upon how complex the site may be, when we're making these properties available. And then the third is that we seek developers through an open and competitive process. In our lingo, that's request for qualifications, request for proposals process, unless we are, of course, otherwise directed by you, City Council, or the City Manager. We also establish some incentives in there because oftentimes in a best practice, the land itself can be used as a subsidy. So we establish that the city may negotiate a sale or lease price at less than that fair market value to ensure that those affordable housing goals are met. But that has to be demonstrated in a pro forma. So we do expect that when asking for a discount on city land, that we see it in open book and we understand how that plays in a development pro forma. And then also, if we do in fact receive revenue from the sale of land for affordable housing, that those funds will then be directed to our affordable housing initiatives. So with that, after the review of the policy tonight, then our immediate next steps are to develop these requests for qualifications for 2 city-owned sites that have been identified, the 319 Biltmore Avenue site, which is adjacent to Lee Walker Heights redevelopment, as well as 91 Riverside Drive, formerly known as the old Ice House and River Arts. We do intend, after that RFQ process, to revisit the policy to ensure that it's working in our favor and working to achieve the outcomes that we've established, and then move forward with other properties, including Cedar Hill, which is in the Deaver View, Pisgah View community, and future South Charlotte Street, Ashland Avenue. So that concludes my short presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and Paul D'Angelo is here as well. Thank you.
Questions? So just remind me, good progress, and I'm really interested in, the fact that the community gave a lot of input on it. Just to go over it again, 15 years down the road, and say the project isn't in compliance. What can the city do? What's the legal? How do we make sure that this sticks? I get that question a lot with our policies, especially in a situation where we've possibly sold the land. And so, you don't have a lease, so you don't have that kind of typical hook to pull it back. What would be the ramifications, and how are we going to make sure that that the developer is sticking to the bargain?
It's a great question, and I'll also look to Brad to kind of back me up here, because we are developing that now as we look at the 360 Hilliard site and understanding exactly how those tools will function. One of which would be a legal mechanism where we have a deed restriction and a reversion clause that would enable us to get that property back. I'll let Brad kind of expound on that. And then also through Paul's division, they do the oversight and management. So basically the audit of the units year over year, where we have staff that are in contact with the development communities to ensure, we double check their rent rolls, we do an audit of their rent rolls to ensure that the families in those units are at the appropriate income levels. So Brad, do you want to take it from there to just talk about the reversionary?
Just briefly, Nikki is absolutely right. We have some very strong and I think effective, well-used and vetted legal tools, regardless of the mechanism by which we are putting the property out there, whether it is a rental situation or a sale. We use things like conditional, like we do in our B1 conditions for conditional rezoning, to put those on the real estate record so that we can enforce those in equity or in other legal remedies. With sales of these properties, we'll put deed restrictions. You shall use this property for this or else. And that type of language is something that is commonly used in order to enforce for the long term these sort of restrictions on the use of property. So we feel that we've drafted some pretty good language of these in the past and can continue to utilize that tool in the future and feel comfortable with our legal powers in doing so.
So the only thing, not around this, but maybe down the road, that we report to one of the committees, probably HCD and possibly the council, just every year, kind of the result of that audit. How many affordable units do we have out there that that are responsible to us, that are reporting into us, if nothing else, to remind us of all the product or units that we actually have out there that the city's responsible for making sure it's affordable. I think it would help the community understand that we are asking these people to adhere to the deal for the term of the agreement, but also remind the community of the work that's been done around affordable housing. But with that, I would make a motion to adopt this plan. I am looking for the words and can't find them right now. Okay, I would make a motion to approve a resolution to adopt a policy for developing city-owned land for affordable housing, entitled Policies for Implementing Affordable Housing on City-Owned Land.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. So would anyone like to speak on the motion to, seriously, Nina? Okay.
I think we need to start a punch card system.
Yeah, like you get like
a dance card.
You get two drink tickets and that's it. Yeah.
Sorry, it's in my wheelhouse, Nina Tovish. As you move forward with filling in the details on this policy, I heard the presentation underscoring the notion that a minimum of 20 years of set aside for affordable housing. I would just urge the council to bear in mind that we're talking about publicly owned land. Publicly owned land. This is a trust. This is property owned by the citizens of this wonderful city. I urge you to be as proactive as possible in seeking to have affordable setbacks, set-asides that last longer than 20 years. 20 years is the blink of an eye. 50 years would be good. Perhaps even longer, perhaps even in perpetuity. I think that demonstrates the public trust, the public ownership of that property. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that a portion of that property stay committed to affordable public access. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on the motion to approve this item? No? Okay.
Can I just say one thing on that point? I'm so sorry.
Sure, no, if you're waking up.
I was just going to let it go, but Nina raised it. This is, we have really struggled with this. And when this policy, almost in this exact form, came to HCD 5 months ago, something like that, the three of us said, not good enough. And we sent it back and we said, you got to do more. This is our land. This is our best chance to get as much as we possibly can, and we have got to do better. And I feel like some of the folks who were here earlier, pushing on renewable energy and climate change. It's like this is the place that we just we pushed and pushed, and I think the work session a couple of weeks ago just sort of made us realize that there is a financial reality here that doesn't match up to our dreams and desires. And I am confident in our staff that they have turned over every rock and looked in every place to maximize the value of our land for affordable housing, and I have to trust their recommendation and that of our city manager as well. So it is not what I want it to be. I want more. I want a lot more, but it's not. We can't fight the financial framework here. So.
Yeah, the work session we held right here in this room around affordable housing, which the manager organized, was very, very helpful, sort of on the ground, how this works. Brought in a developer who has 3,500 units of affordable housing under her belt in multiple cities, mostly the Charlotte area. And she really broke it down for us, what we would realistically be able to leverage out of city-owned land. And I think this policy pushes the limits of what is realistic. The only other thing I would say about the sort of in perpetuity deed restriction, one of the things you got to be careful about is some unintended consequence where the land, 50 years from now, we're all gone and the land can't be used for some purpose we're not even foreseeing at this point. I don't know, the train station for the zero carbon emission train bullet to DC. I had no idea, but whatever it is. I mean, we actually have some city-owned land in our portfolio that has federal deed restrictions on it, which we got to figure out how to get off of them so we can develop it for housing. So we don't want to create a problem later that can't be undone. But to think about the life of an apartment building or how long a developer might have to finance it for, or something like that is kind of more realistic in terms of the lengths of some of these restrictions. So anyway, this is great that we're moving forward with this policy. It is somewhat depressing because you wish you could leverage thousands and thousands of units for folks, but it's very difficult to do that. So with that, we have a motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Okay, the next item, I hand over to the Vice Mayor for the selection of our TDA board members.
Great, thank you. Right before the City Council meeting, we interviewed 2 applicants for the board seat, one of the city appointed board seats for the Buncombe County Tourism Development Authority, and it is for specifically an owner or operator of hotels, motels, bed and breakfast, or vacation rental management company with 100 or fewer units. We had 2 applicants that came in front of us and interviewed with us, and so I'm going to ask everyone to vote on who they would like, and the choices are Pratik Bhatka and James Poole. So, VJ?
Bhakta.
Okay.
Esther? Pool.
Pool.
Cool. And I'd be Poole too.
You promised they'd get a call in the morning.
Yeah, maybe a text. Okay, so Mr. Poole will be the city appointment.
Okay. So that concludes the formal portion of our agenda. I have a few people that signed up for public comment at the end. The first is Claire Hanrahan. Is Claire still here? Okay. Kim Roney. Oh, you know what? Hers says consent agenda. I think there was a little confusion about what this sign-up sheet was for. Susan Sertan. I'm probably not saying that right, but you'll tell me. Pull that microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Just pull. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. It's Susan Sertain, and that's okay. Add a little French flair, you got it. Thank you so much for letting me come up and speak. I represent almost 500 and growing residents who love our urban forest. I'm here today to say that we expect stricter tree policy and enforced fines. Who is moving here and cutting down our trees? Who is letting them? We watched as nearly 200 trees went down last week, and we started out this week with one going down on Monday in Montford for a driveway. Some of the trees that went down last week were because of greed, some were because of ill planning, and some were from willful ignorance. Would you show up to a job site assuming that your orders were correct if they read to cut down 9 80-year-old trees at the YWCA? And not have the presence of mind to call and find out and make sure, is this okay? Double check. There is no training, no individual permits for each of these jobs from the big utility companies. We do need our trees to be policed. Our tree policies and fines and procedures are outdated and do not comply with the scientific fact that our house is burning down and we are stoking that fire with our Asheville trees. So I really implore you, as you work on these different projects, that you make sure that the planning and zoning, everybody that's involved, save as many trees as you can. The mature trees will not be replaced in the work that they're doing for us until maybe 50 years, maybe 70. And 200, almost 200 mature trees went down last week. And we just have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, can we continue doing that and have it make sense? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Van Vogel. Okay, that's all I have signed up to speak in a Vogel. Yes. You're between us and
no pressure.
Hey, I'm sorry to keep you here. I'm Vicki Meath from West Asheville and the director of Just Economics. And I didn't realize that we were only having one meeting in October, so I get to hang out with you for the long ones to make public comment about transit. So just as a reminder, Just Economics and our Better Buses Together campaign has worked on transit for a long time. We've supported the Transit Master Plan, that would make route change, that initially planned for route changes and the extension of evening hours to begin in July, a couple months ago, when that plan was first approved. During the budget process, we learned that, this wasn't going to happen really till January, and although our bus riders were frustrated with that, we understood. Then there was also this break apart, right, between the route changes that were going to be implemented and the extension of the evening hours. During the budget process, we heard a number of different things, capacity, funding. There was different reasons why we couldn't do this. And in the end, it felt like there was some capacity issues because when more money showed up in the budget, it wasn't put towards the evening extension hours. And we felt, just going back also too, we felt this was the perfect storm of opportunity for us with you all making transit a #1 priority at your retreat last year, and also having the new influx of funds coming from the sale of Mission Health, that we thought this was the perfect storm to really move the needle significantly on transit that we think needs to happen. So anyways, if you remember from the budget, after the budget votes, I made some public comments asking that we have some idea of what are those capacity benchmarks in terms of buses, in terms of city staff, in terms of the management company, to be able to get the evening hours going. Where do we need to get to? Because on the money side, we're gonna push you once we know that the capacity is there. And I'm showing my hand, but you all should probably know my hand by now.
I'm shocked. It's really, you're gonna push
exactly.
us? No.
Yeah. So anyways, I've asked staff in face-to-face meetings as well as through emails where those capacity benchmarks are, and we have not gotten those, and I am asking council to work with staff and to figure out what are those capacity benchmarks. Julie reminded me this evening that there's a lot of staff time and effort going into the 2020 the route changes that are to begin in January. We get that, understand it, but also our transit riders can't keep waiting and being pushed off. So thank you.
Man, that was 3 minutes. Good.
So, Deborah, to that point, because I do remember all of those conversations, and we did commit that we would come up with some benchmarks. Do you have a benchmark for when we will have the benchmarks?
I don't have the benchmark for when we have the benchmark, but I know that Jessica and Eunice are working on it, and let me just say we will have something in a couple of weeks. I'll just put it out there.
Okay. Does anybody else?
Not that you're not welcome.
Yes. Okay.
But when you come up, bring a pillow.
Okay. All right. So we are adjourned. We are meeting October 22nd. So we will see you then.